Chapter 1041. At this moment, the entire space was filled with such white flames. It didn't hurt the cultivators within the vast habitat. However, those who were sensitive to the power of the void felt that the sturdiness of the void barrier had increased by at least 6 times. At this moment, Alcuin walked out from the broken main hall of the Learning Palace. He used the existence and destruction technique to help Yuan Jing repair her foundations. Even with Song Shengdao's various medicines, he still used up a lot of energy. He had been hiding, and now that the situation was settled, he showed himself and walked beside Aoe. His aura was still weak, and his true essence was dim. However, when he looked at the scenes in front of him, Aoe's ashen white face was instantly dyed red by the blood in his body. His eyes were filled with shock. World-burning flame? It should be. Aoe replied expressionlessly, and then looked towards Zhongsho with a complicated expression. It seems like your brother is going to start a massacre today. She had heard of the Liu family sky-burning ability and had seen it several times. However, she didn't expect that the world-burning flame that had evolved to its peak would actually be so strong. The Liu family world-burning flame had the ability to burn worlds and also had the ability to lock down space. The 10,000 celestial formation had the ability to strengthen the world barrier, but now it seemed like it couldn't compare to Zhongsho's Blood Eye ability. Aoe nodded his head, using the power of the 10,000 celestial formation to display such a scale of world-burning flame. Naturally, Zhongsho's plan wasn't just to stop those few end realms from leaving the vast habitat. This time Xingxia is probably in trouble. At this moment, the weakest end realm saint venerable in the vast habitat was Xingxia. This person had grievances with Song Shengdao. He was arrogant and vicious when he did things. Aoe really didn't think that Zhongsho would have a reason to let this person go. Unfortunately, that old man Yuan Jiang is too strong. This battle will probably be a one-sided one. He couldn't stay. According to what he knew, this old dragon had always been fearful of the slightest thing. Now that it had been defeated, it was likely that it would immediately flee thousands of miles away without a chance to do so. At this moment, the entire vast habitat was shaking intensely. However, it wasn't like before, when the formation base shook and Song Shengdao's 170,000 cultivators were in grave danger. It was Taisher and Zhu Zi who had forced their way out. They were working together with the 5 god venerables to attack the barrier outside the vast habitat. They tried to save the people trapped in the vast habitat. However, Zhongsho didn't do as everyone expected, first taking the vast expanse. The sword light was pointed at Xingxia. What he was looking at was the black Qilin that was about to flee out of the vast habitat, but was forcefully stopped by Zhongsho's sky-burning words. This mutated god beast wasn't as strong as before. Its eyes were filled with panic and anxiousness. Scared? As Zhongsho laughed coldly, Showery in his sleeve had calmed down. However, the thoughts that spread over were filled with excitement and joy. A strong enemy that it couldn't go up against was about to be wiped out under its master's sword. It was no different from dying in its hands. There was nothing that made it happier than this. Zhongsho's thoughts returned to calmness. No thoughts at all. Large amounts of King Path energy surged into the god-refined sword and helped the other 6 swords. True chi and spiritual energy flowed through the talisman formation within the sword and formed many mysterious talismans. Then, he controlled the heaven path intent that had gathered to its peak to form a sword and fly down. At the same time, Taisher's furious roar reverberated throughout the vast habitat. Kid, you are bold. With a loud explosion, the space barrier near the black Qilin was finally forcefully smashed open. The white bone hammer also smashed in and fiercely collided with the boundless sword energy that was like an upside-down galaxy. The surging energy caused everything within dozens of miles to turn into mush. Nothing was left untouched. Giant hammer and sword energy, the two of them were actually on the same level, causing the space to shake. At this moment, the Heaven Path Sword intent that Qing Xin couldn't block, even when he went all out, was actually being forcefully scattered by the white-boned giant hammer. Xiaoguan's brow rose up, and he was about to attack. However, just as the silver pattern shone around his right hand, Xiaoguan exclaimed and used an unexpected ability. Oh! Sword split into beginning and end ability. So that is the case. My junior nephew is using the same trick? No wonder Kunming's vital energy seem to be disappearing a little quicker. Although the common people's sword formation was unbelievably strong, it was easy to dodge. If one was too far away and didn't have the binding power of the 10,000 celestial formation, it was actually of limited threat to end realm experts. However, Zhongshou used the 900,000 Taoist faction disciples to force Qing Xian to take one sword head-on. Then he slashed Kunming down. At this moment, it was the same, using the black Qilin to force Taishu to take it head-on. But why is it Taishu? The best targets should be Zhu Zi and Dongsheng. Thoughts flashed, and in just an instant, Xiaoguan comprehended something. Then, he broke out into a laugh. To delay the time when Taishu reaches true realm, beginning and end ability. The two of them are indeed enemies, and today is the only chance. My junior nephew has a chance. So, he has his own selfish motives. However, he didn't care. Song Shengdao felt that each person was an individual and had their own freedom. He didn't force disciples to sacrifice for the sect or for others. Today, Zhongshou had already done enough for Song Shengdao, and he couldn't force him to do anything else. Moreover, this sword slashing down was also beneficial to Song Shengdao. The will of heaven and earth within the vast sword energy slowly thinned. However, just at this moment, a ball of similarly vast essence energy suddenly surged into the sword formation. It suddenly exploded out, causing the Heaven Path sword strength to crazily rise once more. The first to bear the brunt of it was the white bone hammer. It cried out as it was forcefully forced out of the vast habitat. Heaven's swallowing energy conversion technique? No. Genesis Supreme groaned, and then his voice became abnormally shrill and shrill. Endless light, endless darkness. It is the infinite beginning and end. You are the unlimited beginning and end Buddha. You want to stop my Endao? Kunming's end realm body was really close to an indestructible body. Even the 11th tier heaven-devouring energy conversion technique could not devour his body. In this world, the only thing that could swallow end realm essence energy and then explode it out was this unlimited beginning and end technique. Zhongshou's face was cold, and he wasn't distracted at all. When a Heaven Path sword was strengthened to the extreme, it gave off an unlimited light, which shone down on the entire vast habitat. After smacking the white bone hammer away, it sped into the void. The soul senses of others were too weak, and they couldn't sense anything. Even Zhongshou was the same. However, Xiaoguan and Long Ying could sense that outside of the vast habitat, one of the Taishu demon lord's arms was broken, following which Taishu's furious and pained cries rang out. This sword at least caused this demon lord to step in a half-a-step true realm, and even delay his true realm stage by 10,000 years. Chapter 1042. The entire vast habitat was filled with a sharp shriek. That was Taishu Demon Lord, filled with grievances and endless hatred. His spiritual sense appeared in the world. It made one's head feel like it was about to split open. Those with weaker cultivations felt like their souls were about to explode. Luckily, a layer of golden light spread out from the purple gold pagoda. Although it wasn't able to suppress the weird sound, it caused the 170,000 cultivators in the vast habitat to calm down and not be affected by the shriek. Zhongshou, Tanxiu, what an unlimited beginning and end. You actually dared to plot against me? I will kill you. Sooner or later, I will make you wish you were dead. I regret being born in this world. Taishu was obviously furious to the extreme. He was at a loss and was hysterical. He didn't have the demeanor of an end-realm Saint Venerable at all. Zhongshou pursed his lips and felt a chill in his heart. Taisher probably hated him to the extreme. However, the battle for the Tao path was the most dangerous, and he couldn't give in. The foundation of his grand technique was the Tao, but this Tao existed between beginning and end. The former was the main, and the latter two were the support. Only in this way would his world-shocking spiritual art not have any flaws. This was why he couldn't allow Taisher to step into half a step true realm, and try to enter true realm to snatch the Tao path. Since he had a chance to defeat Taisher, naturally, he wouldn't give it up. He was always decisive when he did things. Since he saw a chance, even if he exposed the unlimited beginning and end technique and his identity as the unlimited beginning and end Buddha, he would delay the time of Taisher's Tao merger by 10,000 years. He would rather have problems in the future than see this chance slip away from his side. After that sword, the flesh and blood power that he swallowed from Kunming exploded out. The vast expanse sword continued forward, but it was forcefully stopped by a powerful force. It stopped in midair and showed signs of dissipating. Zhong Shaxin knew that this was the limit and decisively gave up on the remaining sword energy. He only retracted a portion of his strength. Less than 10% of the heaven path strength swept towards the black Qilin. He actually forcefully dragged this mutated divine beast that represented the evilness of the world back. The black Qilin was still roaring and struggling. Its eyes were filled with unwillingness. Zhongsho scoffed coldly. With a thought, he placed the illusionary heart mirror behind his head. Illusory mind-soul fixation. The unlimited beginning and end technique once again swallowed the power of the Treastrimsa celestial formation and gathered it in the mirror. An enormous amount of elemental energy and spiritual energy instantly broke through the layers of restrictions on the mirror. A green light shone down and locked onto the body of the black Qilin, causing this peak Saint Realm God beast to be unable to move. The vast habitat shook once more. The Taisher demon lord struck the space barrier once more. In his anger and anxiety, his strength was nearly twice as strong as before. Zhongsho couldn't be bothered to pay attention to it. He had the Treastrimsa celestial array and Xiuguan. This common people's vast habitat wouldn't be destroyed by those few end realms in the outer region world river. He just needed to be careful and not let Taisher save this black Qilin that was almost in his hands. His private matters were done, and he was satisfied. Next would be official matters. At this moment, his eyes turned and landed on Dong Zhongshu and Xingxia. The two of them were still unable to break free from the vast habitat. At this moment, their faces were ashen white. Dong Zhongshu stood in the air and said with a green face, "Stupid ruler, are you going to be enemies with the Confucian faction? Song Shengdao has no ruler and no father. Speaking of equality goes against the rules of the saints. He is the same as an evil demon. You are helping him, and sooner or later, you will suffer. It wasn't easy for you to get your Deqian foundations. Don't fall and die in 20 years. Samarim's eyes flashed, and then he smiled and shook his head. Zhongsho has never felt that he was more noble than others. A country needs rules, but it shouldn't be so strict to restrict the people. People are like water. They can carry the boat, but they can also sink it. Was it really useful to fool the people and treat them as weeds? If they are bullied and can't live, they will rebel and change the world." He said, "I am magnanimous enough to accept Song Shengdao and the teachings of the various schools of thought. Naturally, I can accept the Confucian faction. However, with what they are doing now, maybe one day I will burn books and bury them. There are many examples of people being harmed by the rules of the Confucian faction. Hiding from one another is harmful to the country, and Deqian will definitely ban it. Burn books and bury Confucians? Good. Before Zhongsho finished, Dong Zhongshu's eyes were about to pop out of their sockets. He said several good words, his face flushing red. Who knew that at the end of the cloud, desolate era, there would be another tyrant like the Qin Emperor? After the Qin dynasty, you are the most stupid ruler in the history of the Qin dynasty. You want to burn books and bury Confucians? My Confucian faction is waiting for you outside of the vast habitat, Zhu Zi was also furious, rage surging in his eyes. However, he instinctively felt that something wasn't right. There seemed to be some change in Zhongshu's body that resonated with the heaven and earth. Not only did it make him feel fear, but it also made him feel a strange sense of closeness. What's going on? Why does this feeling feel so weird? The Confucian faction didn't know about energy viewing techniques, but before Zhu Zi reached the Tao, he studied the books of Taoism, Confucianism, and legalism. However, at this moment, when he gathered spiritual energy in his eyes, what he saw was empty. Not only did this not make him feel at ease, but also made him feel even more shocked and weird. At this moment, he was unable to see anything, and he wouldn't find it weird. However, it couldn't be empty. Zhongshu was the overlord of the southeast of the cloud world, the Deqian celestial lord, the head of 76 worlds. This person's king energy should be at the peak of his boiling point. Was it Xiuguan? He tried to break through that man-made barrier several times, but it was to no avail. Zhu Zi's eyes instantly looked towards Xiuguan. At this moment, he only felt helpless, with the top-end realm person in the world covering for him. In this world, there were probably only a few people who could see through Zhongshu's fate. However, what was this person trying to hide? Xiuguan smiled and didn't say a word, not bothering at all. Zhongshu was the saint king of the world. The Tao merged with the heavens. So how could he let the Confucian faction know about it? In the past, Shi Zi was schemed against by the various factions. Now he was just collecting some interest. Zhongshu shook his head. This Saint Dong really couldn't be reasoned with. He was too lazy to argue with this person and said solemnly, I am holding the sword formation and won't be able to be distracted. Senior Master Xiuguan, Master Long Ying, Master Xian Shuang, Senior Master Yuan Jing, please help me. When Long Ying and the other three heard this, their faces turned solemn. They knew that the battle today had reached the end and was also the most crucial moment. It would decide the outcome of the battle. Xiuguan's gaze retracted and he smiled. I dare not to follow your orders. The silver light continued to expand. Apart from locking down the vast habitat, it also trapped Dong Zhongshu and Xingxia within the vast habitat. Long Ying's expression didn't change, and he said flatly, Naturally, I will go all out. Although he didn't do anything, his sword intent was even purer and spread out of the vast habitat. Wanderer Yuan Jing giggled. You want to seal it? Dong Zhongshu, that year when you and Zheng Xian worked together to kill my master, did you think that you would end up like this? All right, there is also Brother Xingxia. Although Lin Shuang didn't say anything, she chanted out and white light slowly gathered around Zhongshu's body. Zhongshu could feel that the true essence and life force around his body instantly recovered to its peak. With his celestial realm cultivation and using King Path martial arts to forcefully control the sword formation, half of the hidden injuries were instantly removed. It also totally wiped out all his worries. He felt grateful in his heart. Zhongshu's spiritual sense became even more focused. The spiritual energy in the sky surged and continued to cycle. More heaven and earth intent was forcefully pulled over by the sword formation and merged with the sword energy. Just a breath later, the 7 swords in the sky buzzed once more, especially the God-refined sword which buzzed the most intensely. The spiritual sense that the sword spirit spread over was really excited. You were so happy? Oh, enemies! With Shi Zi's death, the God-refined sword spirit naturally felt worried about Dong Zhongshu and Xingxia. This was why even if Kunming, who was also End Realm, died, the God-refined sword didn't feel happy. Only these 2 people were the ones it really cared about. Zhongshu didn't hesitate to control the sword formation to lock onto the weaker Xingxia. The latter's face turned slightly ashen white. He didn't hesitate to go all out and struggle. Samuraim's expression didn't change, but a look of disdain flashed across his face. What was the point of going all out now? Slash! The enormous sword of heavenly Tao descended once more. The moment it clashed, the few top celestial artifacts that Xingxia tossed out were all smashed. At this moment, beside Xingya, There was a heaven-supporting hand which reached in at the same time. Samarim squinted. He knew that it was Wushang Yuan demon Li Bieshue. Out of the 3 demon ancestors in the cloud world, only 2 were left after Shizi died. The 2 of them were always close to each other in the cloud world. At this time, he had to save him. Zhongshu didn't care at all. He tilted the Heaven Path sword intent slightly, like he was going to lock onto Li Bieshue. Wushang Yuan demon was shocked. The hand that he reached out retracted like it had touched a hot flame. After forcing him back, Zhongshu didn't hold back anymore. He vented all his sword power toward Xingxia. 10 days ago, I want to avenge the death of hundreds of my fellow disciples from the heavenly monarch world trampling. The moment his voice fell, Xingya's entire body abruptly crumbled, turning into blood and powder that scattered everywhere. However, his soul still didn't dissipate. Not only did it not dissipate, but the strength of its struggle also increased by several times. Zhongshu laughed coldly. He formed a seal, and the 9-layer pagoda flew over with at least 20% of the power of the 10,000 celestial formation. Suppress. The golden pagoda swelled and instantly expanded to 10,000 feet before crashing down. It forcefully suppressed Xingya's indestructible soul under the golden pagoda. With the buff of the entire 10,000 celestial formation, this person definitely wouldn't be able to escape. At this moment, the sword power was used up. Zhongshu scattered the remnants, and the common people's 7 swords started to accumulate power once more. However, just at this moment, the flesh and blood around Dong Zhongshu exploded. He actually took the initiative to blow up his body to forcefully break open the vast habitat barrier. Chapter 1043. Long Ying and the others were slightly shocked, shock appearing on their faces. They praised Zhongshu for attacking Xingxia first, no matter how they looked at it. This Confucian faction, Saint Dong, didn't look like someone who didn't care about his face and was so vicious to blow up his own body to escape. On the contrary, Xingxia, who came from the demon sect, was even more vicious. He was vicious to others and vicious to himself. However, this Dong Zhongshu was surprisingly decisive. He escaped, as expected from the End Realm Saint Venerable, who wiped out the Confucian faction 8,000 years ago, allowing the Confucian faction to rule the cloud world. A light flashed in Samarim's eyes, but he still didn't stop the sword formation. The common people's 7 swords continued to gather the will of the heavens, causing the sword's strength to slowly rise. Xiaoguan shook his head. Brother Dong is really decisive. However, if I allow you to escape today, Xiaoguan would have let senior brother down. Several crescent-shaped silver lights shot out from his sleeves. This was the second time he had used a weapon since the common people's vast habitat battle. The moon blade shot out and struck right at Zhu Zi, who was outside the vast habitat. God weapon? Zhu Zi's expression changed, but he didn't panic. With a soft chant, a crimson brush flew out and began to draw in the air. For words were written in the air, to know by examining objects. In an instant, the entire space was frozen. All of a sudden, all the theories, all the laws seemed to have been sorted out from the inside out. The few silver-colored moon blades struck it. However, the spiritual light dissipated and they were reflected back. However, at this moment, the common people's sword formation that Zhongshu controlled was finally ready once more. Kill! With a thought, the 10,000 feet wide sword light once again slashed out with specks of starlight, breaking into the void. Zhu Zi blocked the moonblade, but he wasn't able to avoid this sword of the heavens. After another tremor that caused the void to shake endlessly and almost collapse, Yi Qingtong's voice rang out. The common people's sword light directly smashed apart the remaining portion of Dong Zhongshu's body along with his end realm indestructible soul. The remaining strength wasn't used up, and it even shattered a small portion of Zhu Zi's palm. Dong Zhongshu's soul was wiped out in one sword. Zhu Zi's expression relaxed instead, and he heaved a sigh of relief. Long ago, when Zhongshu used the world-burning flame, he knew that Dong Zhongshu's life. Although Dong Zhongshu's death, he wasn't suppressed. End Realm didn't die, as long as no one did anything to them. So at most for the 5,000 years, they would be revived. Ants when he's. He didn't bother about the injury on his right hand. Zhu Zi's eyes were cold as he stared coldly at Zhong Shou within the vast habitat. What a Qian Emperor Lord. What a unlimited beginning and end Buddha. I have learned a lot. Since you want to end your own Confucian faction, then don't blame me. My Confucian faction will definitely repay you for everything today. After he finished speaking, he directly crossed the void and left the place. The vast habitat was locked down by the world-burning words and the 30 heaven formations. It was okay outside of the vast habitat. Li Bieshue's voice rang out at the same time. From today onwards, within the cloud world, I will teach you that the De Qian mirror is filled with flames and you will never be at peace. That voice was like an iron halberd clashing, like it came from the depths of hell. Taisha didn't say anything more, scoffing coldly before leaving. His gaze was firm, and he knew that from today onwards, they were enemies. Since Zhong Shou dared to attack, then naturally, he wouldn't fear him. It was useless to say anything more. The future was long. A celestial realm, Ant actually dared to provoke him. To fight for the Endao and even snatch the Protector Beast, he was asking to die. Clenching his fists, Genesis Supreme took a step forward and left the world river. Today, he felt pain in his heart, and he had lost a lot of face. He wasn't willing to stay here for a moment longer. If he stayed here, would he be mocked by the enemy? As for Qing Xian and Tai Wang, they had left after Kunming died, and there was no sign of them. At this moment, the vast habitat was silent once more. Several breaths later, Xiuguan laughed coldly. His clear voice resounded through the void at this moment. It could even be heard dozens of worlds away. Yuan Jiang, today you offended my common people's vast habitat, so you need to give Xiuguan a satisfactory explanation. If not, don't blame me for attacking and destroying your dragon race dragon palaces. Yuan Jiang's body suddenly stopped. At this moment, he was so depressed that he was about to spit out blood. At the same time, he frowned and started to worry. The dragon race and Song Shengdao had no grievances with one another. However, after today, the situation was different. Today, to kill A.O. Kun, he charged into the common people's vast habitat. That was a reasonable reason. However, he shouldn't have done that when Song Shengdao was on the brink of death. If the common people's vast habitat was wiped out, then it was still okay. However, in the end, Song Shengdao won. Instead, the Confucian, Taoist, and demon factions suffered heavy losses. As for him, he had offended Song Shengdao to death. He was the one who had 3 end realm cultivators and stood at the peak of the cloud world once more. Song Shengdao. Suddenly, he had a thought and looked behind him. He felt that more than half of the heaven and earth mighty power that had been lingering in that area had dissipated. Wei Su, Yuan Jiang's pupils constricted. Looking at the tribulation light, it was obvious that it only had the strength for one final strike. He couldn't help but feel terrified. He had heard of Wei Su before. He used the Great Sun True technique to gain the name of Great Sunblade Saint. He was one of the top talents among the Saint realms. From this, one could see how deep his foundations were. Without any external disturbances, this person would have a high chance of passing the End Realm Lightning Tribulation. Speaking of which, from today onwards, Song Shengdao would have 4 End Realm Saint Venerables. He couldn't help but feel a headache. Even 20,000 years ago, when they still had the Cloud World and were at their peak, the Dragon Race had to take them seriously. Today, he rushed over because of the item that the Taoist faction promised. However, in the end, the gains didn't make up for the losses. Why are you speechless? Do you have nothing to say? Xiuguan continued to laugh coldly. You have witnessed what happened today. Your race's A.O. Kun has given me a new lease on life. I don't care what rules your dragon race has and what grievances you have with him. From today onwards, if your dragon race End Realm touches him, I, Xiuguan, will wipe out your entire race. At that time, there is no need for me to say anything. Yuanjiang's face flushed red and rage surged in his eyes. However, he suppressed it. At this moment, Shoguan did indeed have the right to say such words. The top end-realm person in the cloud world, someone who used the normal Xianhuang great strength technique to prove the eternal Tao. Once he had helpers, his abilities were enough to make the Dragon Palace fear him. He also knew that this person wanted the grievances between A.O. Kun and the instant space dragon race to be settled by the two of them. The Dragon Palaces all around couldn't interfere in this matter. That made sense. However, did they really have to lower their heads to Song Xingdao? Chapter 1044. Within the common people's vast habitat, A.O. Kun bowed gratefully towards Shoguan. Senior, thank you. With the words of the top-end realm in the cloud world, if the Dragon Palace wanted to do anything to him, they had to consider it carefully. If the end realm Saint Venerables didn't attack, then he and A.O.E. could be disregarded. Shoguan felt guilty and shook his head. I, Song Xingdao, owe you. I helped junior sister Yuan Jing rebuild her end realm Dao foundations. Even if I help you settle the grievances of the past, it is something I should do. However, with the strength of our common people path, this is all we can do. Although this battle ended and 3 end realm Saint Venerables were wiped out, sealing one of them was sealed. If he sealed one of them, Kunming and Dong Zhongshu would need 5,000 years to recover. It could be said that they were heavily injured. However, Song Xingdao's situation of having enemies all over the world still didn't change. If what he expected was right, this battle shouldn't be considered over. Before settling down, Song Xingdao indeed couldn't take out much strength to help A.O. Kun. A.O. Kun was really calm and didn't care. He was already grateful enough. He was able to break free from the bet between Long Ying and Qing Xian because Wei Su led Zhongshou over. He comprehended the existence and destruction technique because of Zhongshou. He owed too much, and today, he was just repaying a portion of it. At this moment, the battle had already ended. The vast habitat was in a mess and was filled with destruction. Apart from the 5 sword platforms and the Golden Pagoda, there was no other building that was in perfect condition. Although the 10,000 celestial formation was strong, it couldn't direct all the external strength into the void. When end-realm cultivators went through their tribulation, they had to pay the price of destroying a world. Although Shizi was really talented, and a large portion of the tribulation power that spread out was used by the 10,000 celestial formation to protect the vast habitat. However, there were many who were still charging about in the vast habitat. During the most dangerous period, the formation could only protect the 170,000 cultivators in the vast habitat. As a result, these academies were completely destroyed. However, when the last tribulation cloud dissipated in the southern sky, it was still there. 7-colored light overflowed in all directions, and a strange yet familiar tyrannical will stretched out from that direction. The entire vast habitat was still filled with cheers. Done. The revered one has already completed his tribulation. From now on, he will live a long life. Today I, Song Xingdao, have a return of Patriarch Xian Shuang and Patriarch Yuan Jing to complete my Dao foundation. Wei Su successfully passed his tribulation and stepped into End Realm. It's 3 blessings coming at the same time. 4th joy is the one. Kunming, Xingxie, that Confucian sect Sage Dong, and my Song Xingdao were all killed. Is there anything to be happy about? Of course I'm happy. Till now, I still don't believe that I, Song Xingdao, actually won. Thanks to the common people's 7 swords that Shizi left, my Song Xingdao's 10,000 celestial illusionary space 33 celestial formation, as expected from the top defensive formation in the cloud world. However, without that person, my sect would most probably have been wiped out. Is it Tan Xiao? No, it should be Ancestor Zone. Just now, in front of the many End Realm experts, Shoguan personally admitted that Zhongshou was his junior nephew. Everyone naturally understood that Song Xingdao's identity was definitely one of the second-generation direct disciples. He was indeed worthy of the battle today. Zhongsho first took charge of the 9 palace sword formation and then took charge of the god refined sword formation. He controlled the common people's sword formation perfectly. His shocking talent in the sword path was on full display. That is the blood sword monster lord, Gantian mountain ruler. He is the savior of my Tsang Shengdao. Only someone like him is worthy of the god refined sword. At the start, I felt that the Qin country rule method was compatible with my Tsang Shengdao. So, Ancestor Zong is really my Tsang Shengdao's disciple. The monster lord is the one who contributed the most in this battle. He wiped out 300,000 Dao soldiers and killed Xingxie Kunming. How satisfying. That Dong Zhongshu said that he wanted to change history to wipe out my Tsang Shengdao. What happened now? Just now, did you all hear what he said? Although I am not a ruler chosen by the people, I know that water can sink a boat, but it can also carry it. This is why I give the people power to rule. Under my rule, there is a difference between rich and poor, strong and weak, but there is no difference between noble and lowly. Rule by law such that the strong can't bully the weak. The ruler is the same as the people. If you break the law, then you'll be killed. I swear to treat the people equally. I swear to protect the people of the world. Some of the disciples were delighted as they repeated these words. His eyes flashed with a strange light. When he thought about the dangerous situation at that time, he felt a surge of emotion and his heart was at ease. Zhongsho has never felt that he is more noble than others. A country needs rules and etiquette, but it shouldn't be so strict to restrict the people. I really like those words. Ancestor Zong is naturally good, but those words don't fit with the teachings of my Tsang Shengdao. What don't fit? Didn't you see that even the god refined sword recognized him? Legend had it that the god refined sword spirit was created by Patriarch Shi Zi using a fragment of his soul. It was almost equivalent to Patriarch Shi Zi's avatar. Since he recognized Ancestor Zong as the sword head, naturally, he recognized his Tao. If my common people's path wants to exist in this world, we have to compromise. Rule by law, no matter race, people, celestials, we will all be treated equally. We can't create a truly equal world, but we can make it a fair world with just laws. To be able to do that is already not bad. Pretty much everyone looked towards Zhongsho. Their gazes were all different. There was passion, gratefulness, excitement, and anticipation. At this moment, Zhongsho didn't have time to bother. At this moment, he was fully focused on suppressing the Black Qilin and using it for his own personal use. This half-a-step end-realm god beast was too strong, and its realm was much higher than his. Only today, when he controlled the 10,000 celestial formation and the common people's 7 swords, could he totally suppress it. After this time, he could only ask Xiuguan for help. The top-end realm in the cloud world naturally couldn't do anything to this Qilin. However, in the end, it wasn't as righteous as him, the master of Xiaori. Actually, it was also a form of self-consolation, such that when Xiaori swallowed its source, he wouldn't have any psychological burden. At this moment, the power of the entire 10,000 celestial formation was buffing the Black Qilin. Layer by layer, it pressed down on it and continued to wear it down. The common people's 7 swords led the strength of heaven and earth to suppress the Qilin's soul inch by inch. Zhongsho was really careful, afraid that he would use too much strength and cause this Saint Realm God beast to collapse on the spot. At this moment, Xiaori charged out from his sleeves. It still looked like a little puppy as it used its nose to sniff. Balls of energy that one couldn't see with the naked eye were forcefully sucked over by it. Qilins were born by eating energy. The orthodox Saint Beast Qilin ate the good of the world and was a sign of good luck. The Black Qilin ate the evil of the world and was a sign of calamity. Everywhere it went, the land would dry up and war would break out. However, the source of the two were similar and could even transform into one another. Zhongsho didn't know much about the secrets of the Qilin race. He saw the Black Qilin cry out in rage and annoyance. It was filled with sadness and unwillingness. Its surging strength and cultivation were weakening at a shocking rate. The source beast pellet was sucked in by Xiaori, and actually turned into threads of liquid energy which surged out and was swallowed by Xiaori mercilessly. The latter's aura was crazily growing. It was originally at intermediate celestial realm, but in just a short moment, it charged to peak celestial realm and was about to enter God realm. If this puppy really swallowed the black Qilin, would it charge all the way into Saint realm? Zhong Shou was shocked, thinking to himself that if he had a Saint realm Qilin protecting him, then it would be great. This time he really profited from his trip back. However, just as he was thinking about it, a really familiar voice spread out from behind him. This is the first time I have seen black and white Qilins swallow one another. The source conversion is pretty much flawless. With such a chance, in just a few days, your Qilin will be able to step into Saint realm. However, in my opinion, Junior Marshal Brother, you should take it easy. After all, your Qilin's body and soul are flawed and too weak. It isn't a good thing to try for Saint realm too early. It is best if you suppress it until you reach God realm. 100 years later, or if you have other fortuitous encounters, your body will be stable and you'll be able to reach Saint realm in one go. The one who spoke was Wei Su. His clothes were tattered and pretty much unable to cover his body. One could imagine how dangerous it was when he went through the tribulation. However, at this moment, Wei Su was really energetic. His aura was really shocking. Even if he was wearing beggar clothing, he still looked really elegant. Zhong Shou looked at Wei Su curiously and then looked towards Xiuguan with a questioning gaze. It sounded logical, but he still had to ask the latter. The words of the top-end realm of the cloud world were more reliable. Those words are true. Xiuguan smiled and walked beside Zhong Shou. When Xiaori's aura stepped into God realm, he reached out with a finger and tapped on its head. A rune appeared on Xiaori's forehead. Although the black Qilin source energy was still being swallowed by Xiaori, it didn't strengthen its aura and beast pellet. It was obvious that it was sealed and stored at its brow. Xiaori didn't care about all this. It was obvious that it heaved a sigh of relief and continued to crazily swallow. Zhong Shou was stunned. This fellow actually didn't have a tribulation after entering God realm. I have temporarily suppressed its tribulation and delayed it for 100 days. At that time, it should be able to digest a portion of what it got this time. This place has just experienced an end-realm battle, and there are many end-realm Dao fragments left. Wei Su also just finished his tribulation here. It isn't a good place to go through the tribulation, so it is not bad to comprehend the Dao here. Dozens of end-realm experts clashed here, causing numerous Dao marks to be left within the common people's vast habitat. There were also the flesh and blood of 3 end-realm experts scattered around. To cultivators, this was a huge, fortuitous encounter. Kunming had just died. Although a large portion of his body was swallowed by Zhong Shou's unlimited beginning and end technique, there was still a large portion of it. However, there was still a portion that spread out. Just now, Zhong Shou personally saw that barren land instantly turn into fertile land. However, this place wasn't the place to go through the tribulation. After this battle, this common people's vast habitat would definitely be noticed by the will of heaven and earth. Chapter 1045. However, it was a blessing in disguise. Although the vast habitat was broken, it was still a blessing. Although the vast habitat was broken, within 2,000 years, it would be a cultivation holy land. The blood of end-realm experts soaked in numerous Dao shards, remnants of end-realm intents, Dao marks left behind by Saint Venerables. To cultivators, these were all things that one could only hope for and not hope for. What was even more rare was that all of this was within the control of the 10,000 celestial formation, and the chances of accidents happening were really small. Today, out of the 170,000 common people path cultivators who were fated to watch the battle, if nothing went wrong, there would be a large number of people who would advance to a higher level in a short time. However, this black Qilin might not be swallowed by this fellow. Zhong Shou was stunned and looked towards Xiuguan in shock. Senior Master was going to leave the black Qilin behind? However, this beast was born from calamity, formed from the evil thoughts of the people. Everywhere it passed, there would be bad things. The people of the world avoided it like the plague. That's right. In this world, both good and evil are not good things. Just like your start to end Tao, light and darkness are mixed into one. You have me in you, and you have me in you. How can one differentiate? Even at noon, there are places where the sun can't shine on. Even in the middle of the night, there is light. The one who said those words was Dragon Shadow. At this moment, he walked over. Maybe because this calamity had passed, and he had repaid Wei Su's favor. The old man's face was filled with a smile, and he was really relaxed. No one else can raise this black Qilin, unless it's a heinous individual or a peerless expert like Genesis Supreme. However, to you, it is blessed by the heavens. It is also really beneficial to you and Xiaori. Zhongshou was stunned. Blessed by the heavens? Great benefits? What did longing mean by that? Speaking of which, Zhongshou had done many bad things. However, he was honest and had a clear conscience. However, there wasn't enough evil energy to nourish the black Qilin, an evil spirit that fed on evil energy. Xiaori seemed to sense something and continued to devour the black Qilin's aura source, storing it in the mark between his eyebrows. It's the human heart. No matter how pure the aura of the Tao of Kings is, there are still impurities in it. There were two sides to everything in the world. Otherwise, why would the black Qilin be born? Zhongshou, if you have this black Qilin as your protector spirit beast, it will be worth at least 10 9 heavens pagodas. Xiaoguan woke it up. Then, the black Qilin started to wither, and its true essence fell below Saint Realm. Suddenly, he stretched out his finger and tapped the space between the mutated divine beast's eyebrows. Suddenly, a strange explosion sounded from the black Qilin's body. The exotic beast's expression was one of unbearable pain. Its eyes were filled with disappointment and anger. Zhongshou didn't need to look and knew that Xiaoguan had destroyed the spiritual sense mark that Taisher had planted on the black Qilin. He was still shocked by Xiaoguan's words like a huge wave was rising in his heart. 10 9 heavens pagodas? That would pretty much be worth 2 Avicii thrones. The so-called 9 heavens pagoda was the name of the 9-layer golden pagoda that Wei Su had given him. It was a king path magical artifact and also one of the cores of the 10,000 celestial formation. Before obtaining the Avicii throne and illusionary heart mirror, Zhongshou had been relying on this item to suppress the corruption of the king path energy. If it was as Xiaoguan had said, then the influence of the king path energy on him would be really small. However, how would he subdue this beast? This black Qilin had followed Taisher for at least 3 to 5,000 years. It couldn't be easily subdued just by placing some restrictions on it. Qilins were arrogant, and the black Qilin was the same. Xiaori was attracted by his Saint King energy and also treated him like a parent, which was why it submitted to him. As for this black Qilin, it was obviously prepared to die. Even if he used a secret technique to restrict it, once he released his control, it would immediately kill itself. Clang! A Dao chant broke Zhongshou's train of thought. When he came back to his senses, he saw that Xiaoguan had grabbed the head of the black Qilin. Silver light patterns surged in. A vast and bright light swept around the body of the black Qilin. After a series of buzzing sounds, the resistance and hatred in the black Qilin's eyes finally melted away. Its eyes were slowly filled with a lost expression. Those eyes that were originally filled with darkness and madness were now filled with purity. Zhongshou's brow rose up. He was really surprised. He finally understood what Xiaoguan was planning to do. He was actually using his unparalleled strength to forcefully wipe out every bit of memory of the black Qilin, causing its soul to be as white as paper. A moment later, a giant whirlpool formed in Xiaoguan's hand. The body of the black Qilin retracted, turning into a black ball. Just as Zhongshou was at a loss and didn't understand what was going on, Xiaoguan's hand tapped the center of Zhongshou's brow. Instantly, a heaven-covering power surged into his god cloud Niwen and smashed into his soul. A black light shot in, directly smashing into the black hole Dharma. Zhongshou was shocked, his eyes filled with shock. Right away, he looked at the soul in his body. There was nothing wrong with the Dharma. The black hole Dharma was still stable. No, it was a little more stable. There seemed to be a living being that was born within. The memories of this beast's soul have been wiped clean. Its consciousness is totally blank, like it was just born. A large part of its source was sucked away, and it is heavily injured. It is most suitable for it to rest and recuperate in your darkness, Sun Dharma. Shoguan sensed that Zhongsho was a little annoyed. He smiled. Once this beast recovers and regains its consciousness, it will be your natural protector beast. It will rely on your unlimited beginning and end Dharma to be born, and its foundations will be much purer towards the darkness and Tao. Zhongsho didn't fully believe it, but since it was the words of the top end realm, then it definitely wouldn't be fake. He definitely had his reasons for making such a judgment. He felt a little awkward. After all, there was an extra beast in his soul. If it were to go berserk one day, would it destroy both his soul and spirit? There was also Xiaori. Since the black Qilin entered his black hole Dharma, it had been anxiously circling around him and crying out in unhappiness. At the start, Zhongsho didn't know what was going on, but he slowly understood. This little fellow actually also wanted to barge into his origin soul. It was actually that black Qilin that had lost its consciousness. Did this little fellow think that his soul sea was some kind of beast cage or lair? He really didn't know what to say. It doesn't matter. Long Ing smiled from the side. Your beginning and end Dharma focuses on the Tao of balance. Since there's a black Qilin suppressing the unlimited black Sunday correspondingly within the immeasurable white sun, there naturally needs to be a Saint Qilin overseeing it. Chapter 1046. However, you need to remember that even with the black Qilin as your protector beast, you can't do too many evil things. You need to be careful when you rule. If one day this evil beast suppresses the good side, a huge calamity will descend on you. Shoguan's expression was solemn. His words were filled with warning intent. At that time, even I can only protect you. I probably won't be able to protect these two god beasts. Zhongsho shook his head. He was still hesitating about whether or not to keep Xiaori into his soul ocean. With his personality, he definitely wouldn't do anything too evil. However, he couldn't control the hearts of people. King Path energy was gathered by the hearts of people. It was also the expectations and impressions of the people under his rule. If the country was clean and the country was peaceful, the people would naturally be kind. However, if he did things the wrong way and the people had no way to live, evil thoughts would gather. However, he himself couldn't sense it. Many wise rulers in history were like that. Unknowingly, they did many foolish things in their later years, although they supported the imperial astronomer and the Taichung priest. Among them, the stronger ones could observe the King Qi. However, due to the restrictions of heaven and earth, he couldn't remind them. There were many benefits to recruiting this black Qilin, but there were also many problems. However, he knew that Shoguan and Long Ing did this to use these two god beasts to take the blame. What he did today seemed to be recognized by heaven and earth. He was even said to be the Saint King. However, who could guarantee that everything he did would be correct? In this world, there definitely wasn't a perfect saint. This was why he had to give up power and push everything to the people below. This was to avoid responsibility, but also to prevent himself from making mistakes. The reason why he wasn't willing to keep Xiaori into the White Hole Dharma was because he didn't want to use this little puppy as a scapegoat. With the black Qilin here, the two of them were enemies, but also partners. If one of them really did something that angered the public, then this little kid wouldn't be able to leave. In that case, this little fellow would not be able to leave him even if he wanted to. They would have to die together. The Qilin is born from energy and can't leave you. Even if Junior Brother is unwilling, after a period of time, it still won't be able to leave. This method is just temporarily risky. Once Junior Brother enters End Realm, you won't have to worry. Wei Su also smiled and said a few words of consolation. However, he didn't continue to be entangled in this matter. Instead, he changed the topic and asked, Junior Brother, do you have that All Creations with you? Can you take it out for me to take a look? Zhong Shoshin was even more confused. but he still summoned Xiao Jin. It was wrapped around his arm like an arm guard. At this moment, it was gathered in his hand like a golden jelly. Unexpectedly, two large eyes opened and looked at the people present with watery eyes. The top 5 divine beasts in the world are indeed amazing. Wei Su smiled, and then the area between his fingers suddenly split open. 3 drops of golden blood shot out and landed on Xiao Jin's body. This time, your senior brother was able to transcend the tribulation because of your contribution, junior brother. I don't have anything valuable on me, so I have nothing to thank you with. I can only use these 3 drops of blood essence to help your spirit pet reach new heights. Senior brother, Zhongsho was shocked. Wei Su said it so casually. However, those 3 drops of golden blood were filled with life energy. It also contained an incomparably profound and vast aura. It was Wei Su's life essence blood. Within it was his senior brother's comprehension of the mirror Tao. It was called essence blood, but it was the combination of a supreme Tao scripture and 3 celestial-grade spiritual pills. Even if Wei Su was an end-realm Saint Venerable, he would need at least 300 to 500 years to recover from such consumption. Xiao Jin was really smart. Not waiting for Zhongsho to reject it, it swiftly absorbed the 3 drops of essence blood. It had already broken through to celestial realm, but at this moment, like Xiaori, its true essence crazily increased. Its body slowly softened, and it slowly fell into a deep sleep. Zhongsho opened his mouth and could only retract his words of rejection. This time, he originally wanted to ask for a few sect-guarding artifacts in the Ancestral Hall. But with Wei Su like this, he was unable to open his mouth. He cursed out in his heart. Zhongsho was filled with anticipation. Wanxiang had the ability to mimic. Although it wasn't the same Tao as Wei Su's mirror projection, there were some similarities. After swallowing the formless god demon's crystal, and also after Wei Su taught him the mirror projection technique, who knows how much it would grow in the future. He felt that it was a waste. There were a few sect-protecting celestial treasures in the Ancestral Hall that came from Shizi and still had no owner. If he could take them out, they might have a chance of becoming a god treasure. This senior martial brother Wei Su most likely saw through his intentions and sealed his mouth in advance. What an old fox, he cursed out in his heart. Zhongsho pretended to be sincere. Senior brother, why do you have to do this? You really make me feel guilty and uneasy. Senior brother is going through the tribulation and is stabilizing your foundations. Wei Su smiled and waved his hands to tell Zhongsho to stop. His expression turned serious. Junior brother, do you know that this battle isn't over? Zhongsho's brow rose up and a sharp expression appeared in his eyes. It was indeed not over. The Taoist, Demon, and Confucian factions retreated in such a haggard manner. So how would they take this lying down? They definitely wouldn't be willing for Tsang Xingdao to rise up just like that. Although 3 End Realm cultivators fell today, their overall strength was still several times stronger than theirs. They couldn't do anything about the common people's path vast habitat, but they could attack from outside. Tsang Xingdao's mines, the various subordinate powers, the 3 sects and 6 schools, and even his De Qian. Forget about the first few. It wasn't that they couldn't give up. At most, the 4 factions would destroy one another. Only De Qian and Gantian Mountain were things that he couldn't give up on. They had to fight to the death. Tsang Xingdao had to save them. The Taoist faction and Confucian faction suffered heavy losses because of him. It wasn't unimaginable for them to take revenge in Great Gone. Qing Xian suffered light injuries, and when Tai Wang escaped, he lost a lot of energy. The 2 of them are afraid of the sky-burning Liu family and most probably won't attack you directly. Zhu Zi needs to protect Dong Zhongshu's soul such that he can revive after a few thousand years. The few of them won't directly attack. Genesis Supreme had lost an arm, and he would also need some time to recover from it. The only one to worry about is Wushang Yuan Demon. However, this person won't be able to do much alone. Yuan Jing Sanren also walked over and sneered. Everyone has suffered heavy losses today. Even the 5 ultimate gods have used up a lot of their divine power. With what I see, there won't be another war between End Realm cultivators. If the three factions want to get back their face, they have to start from the battle of the human world. Although you killed 300,000 Dao soldiers in one sword, there's still tens of thousands of them. However, the Shang dynasty still had 10 million soldiers, and the Daoist sect still had more than 50,000 purple Qilin flame spear cavalry. Once they work together and head west, they will be able to crush everything. Battle of the human world? Zhong Shou had an idea and looked at Xiaori, who was still spinning in front of him. This little puppy also felt that something wasn't right. He raised his head and looked around, only to see the people around looking at him with smiles that weren't smiles. Chapter 1048. Pretty much at the same time, within Dowling vast habitat, which was tens of thousands of miles away, the atmosphere was really solemn and depressed. Lost. The three factions working together actually still lost? How is that possible? 9 End Realm Saint Venerables and 5 God Venerables working together. They still couldn't break through a common people's vast habitat? Terrifying 10,000 celestial formation. Terrifying common people's 7 swords. 10,000 years ago, half a step to true realm left such a strong trump card. Without that, Qian monster Lord Zhong Shou, those 7 swords wouldn't have been needed and the 10,000 celestial formation wouldn't have been completed. That tyrant is the main culprit. That year, I found it weird that the Qian and Song Shengdao were too close. Ancestor Kunming has already fallen. His physical body was destroyed, but luckily he could still gather his soul. If Cibei Taoist Lord was still here, this battle might not have ended like this. Nonsense. How can you say something like that? Within the Taoist palace, Qingming stood on a cloud bridge. 2 streams of tears flowed down her cheeks. She clenched her fists tightly and her teeth chattered. It was Zhong Shou again, that evil ruler. She had almost killed her the last time, and this time, it was her closest kin again. Although End Realm experts didn't die and could gather their souls a few thousand years later. However, when she thought about how they wouldn't be able to meet for 5,000 years, she still felt pain in her heart. If Qingming died, if she couldn't get it, maybe after this they would be separated forever. She really wanted to eat his flesh and skin. Sweeping the entire vast habitat, she saw cultivators sitting cross-legged and healing up. Most of them had defeated expressions on their faces. Apart from a huge defeat which made them all depressed, it was also because of Zhong Shou's sword. Although Qing Xian stopped him, he wasn't able to truly kill the 800,000 Taoist faction disciples. However, there were many Taoist faction disciples who were struck by the will of the heavens and their souls were injured. If they couldn't pass this, a portion of them wouldn't be able to advance for the rest of their lives. Many talented disciples might have been wasted just like that. This was the death of Taoism, the great calamity of the Tao sects. A blank look appeared in Qingming's eyes. Even his tightly clenched fists loosened slightly. At this moment, Dowling vast habitat and the 3,000 Taoist sects were extremely weak. Kunming had died, and the 2 Dao Lords had suffered significant injuries as well. Many disciples were already disgusted by the idea of teaming up with the Demon Gate. At this moment, the sect elders and the 3,000 Taoist sects were probably filled with grievances towards the vast habitat and the Taoist Lord. If they couldn't pass this hurdle, it would be the beginning of the decline of the sect. How could they talk about revenge? Suddenly standing up, Qingming flew out of the 10,000 Lanterns cave. As a master of Dao Spirit Palace, she had no problem entering and exiting this place. Now that he had stepped inside, he was completely unaffected by the restrictions. The Daoist children had no intention of stopping them. Although Kunming had died, he had died to save Qing Xian. Not only would Qingming's status in the Dao sect not decrease, but she would also be valued even more. The moment she entered, she heard Tai Huang Taoist Lord's voice ring out. We did indeed suffer heavy losses, but luckily our foundations aren't damaged. A large half of the purple Qilin flame spear cavalry has retreated, and the true martial swordsmen are all safe. Why does senior brother Qing Xian have to worry about that? Unfortunately, Kunming. Qingming's face dimmed once more. A bitter expression appeared at the corner of her lips. The purple Qilin flame, spear cavalry, and true martial swordsmen were indeed safe. However, the true foundations of the Taoist sect weren't here. Within the Taoist sect, there were true cultivators who had a chance of reaching a higher level. After all, even billions of Dao soldiers weren't as valuable as a true end realm. Song Shengdao's common people's 7 swords were a special case. If he left the common people's vast habitat and left the binding power of the 10,000 celestial formation, it would be of little use. It needed 5 end realms to break the formation. However, if it was just to restrict, any one end realm would be enough. However, not only was the future of half of the Taoist sect destroyed, but they also lost their hearts. First, there was Zhong Shou, who wiped out 37 Taoist sects alone. Then, there was today's battle where hundreds of thousands of souls were injured. Both times, they suffered such heavy setbacks. Dowling vast habitat, and even the 2 Taoist ancestors were helpless. So how could they not feel disheartened? Although that is the case, close to 200,000 disciples being struck by the common people's 7 swords. Isn't that worrying? Qing Xian, who was in the middle of the room, had an ashen white face, and it was extremely ugly. Seeing Qing Ming enter, he was slightly distracted, happily nodding his head, a look of pity appearing in his eyes. We have to give an explanation for this matter. We can't let the disciples hate us. From today onwards, I will go into secluded meditation to refine 209 turn energy pills and give them all out. The sect doesn't care about inside or outside. As long as one is injured, one can take it. Tai Huang's eyelids rose up, and he was shocked. The 9-turn energy pill was a top-grade celestial pill and was something God Realm cultivators used to train their spiritual sense. However, to refine such a pill, one needed to consume a lot of resources. When refining it, one also needed the true essence of the pill refiner. Even if an end realm refined it, it would consume a lot. This was why it wasn't common in the world. If a God Realm cultivator got one, they would be delighted. If they could really split the 209 revolutions origin knowledge pills, it would indeed be able to resolve the injuries to the 200,000 disciples' consciousness. Within this 10,000 lantern cave sat close to 20 Saint Realm cultivators, as well as the sect leaders. When they heard this, most of them turned around and gratitude appeared in their eyes. To refine these 209 turn energy pills, Qing Xian wouldn't be able to fight for 20 years. After he refined it, his essence energy would be damaged, and even his cultivation would drop. The price was huge. If the disciples learn about it, they would be grateful for senior brother's love and care. After Tai Huang was shocked, he smiled. Tai Huang can't let senior brother take all the glory. Since you're planning to give a 9-turn energy recognition pill, then I will give it to you. Since you want to give a 9-turn energy pills, then I will also take out 600 Huangya pills. Qingming's expression changed once more. After returning to the vast habitat, her worried heart finally calmed down. The Huangya pill was an intermediate-grade celestial pill and was the exclusive pill of Tai Huang Taoist Lord. It wasn't easy to refine. The 9-turn energy pill could recover one's spiritual sense, while the Huangya pill could increase one's cultivation. It was obvious that the 2 Taoist lords knew about the current situation in the Taoist faction. They took out so many celestial pills to calm him down. The moment Qing Xian and Tai Huang said those words, the suppressive atmosphere within the 10,000 soul lantern cave changed. The disciples' souls being damaged is one. But the other thing I'm worried about is Zhong Shou. Even if Song Shengdao has 4 end realm experts, I don't fear him as much as he does. Qing Xian's eyes were still filled with unhappiness. This kid is in charge of the Deqian country, and his sword path cultivation is at the heavens. Apart from Saint Realm cultivators who can fight him, he is pretty much invincible in the cloud world. If he returns to the cloud world, how should the Taoist faction deal with him? It isn't difficult to kill him, but we might offend the sky-burning Liu family. However, if we allow him to grow, sooner or later, he will cover the sky, and we won't be able to shake him. It will also endanger our Dao sect's 100-year plan. Chapter 1049. Speaking of Zhongsho, the 10,000 Soul Cave was totally silent. Almost everyone present had ferocious expressions on their faces. Their faces were filled with resentment. The Taoist faction had no way to deal with this person. The name of Blood Sword Monster Lord was forged from the blood of hundreds of thousands of disciples from the 37 sections. Today, Kunming even died at his hands. Hundreds of thousands of cultivators were injured because of him, and they hated him to the bone. If we can't kill him, we can choose to work together, Tai Huang said expressionlessly. However, because of what happened before, this kid hates our Taoist faction. Our Taoist faction even had an end realm fall to him, and there are many who want to eat his flesh. This hatred can't be solved, and this path is blocked. After saying this, he looked at Qingming with a deep meaning. Qingming was stunned, and her heart turned cold. She knew that this was Tai Wang criticizing her. In the end, the grievances between the Taoist faction and Zhongsho were only limited to Dowling Vast Habitat and Yuqing. Within the Vast Habitat, there was a saying, Taoist faction cultivators chased peace and didn't do anything. They wanted to leave the world. Actually, there was no need for them to fight to the death with Song Xingdao. Everyone was equal. So what did that have to do with the Taoist faction? Did the prime, clear bloodline want to get out of this matter? Since Zhongsho joined Song Xingdao, this grievance can't be solved. The grievances started at the end of the Cloud Desolate era, when Shizi wanted to get that heaven-opening treasure. At that time, it was destined that only one of the Taoist faction and Song Xingdao could survive. Qing Xian said flatly, causing the atmosphere in the room to become slightly awkward. This was to remind them that the grievances of killing Shizi couldn't be solved. Tai Wang smiled and didn't care. The two of us are afraid of Zhongsho, but there are people who aren't afraid of him. Taisher and Wushang Yuan, Lord, both hate him to the bone. Forget about the latter. The former definitely wouldn't be afraid of the Liu family. It was just that he needed to stay away from Xiuguan and recuperate from his injuries, so he couldn't make a move right now. As for the Liu family, there were many people who wanted his life. If we really have no other choice, it's not impossible for the two of us to personally take action. Therefore, what our sect truly needs to pay attention to is the situation at hand. Since this kid is relying on his King Path martial arts to run amok, then we need to take drastic measures to deal with him. This is also the only chance our Taoist faction has to turn the situation around. I agree. Qing Xian also smiled and said leisurely, be it the common people's 7 swords or the 33 celestial formation, they all need King Dao energy to support them. Therefore, this Deqian is also a place that Song Xingdao must save. Qing Ming listened quietly, and a trace of joy gradually appeared in her heart. He had already guessed the meaning of Qing Xian's Tai Huang. With the 3 religions working together, their strength was still far above Song Xingdao's. Avoiding the common people's vast habitat 33 celestial formations and fighting within the cloud world, the Taoist faction still had a high chance of winning. This battle with Song Xingdao was far from over. Zhongsho's Qin dynasty was indeed Song Xingdao's only weakness. She wasn't the only one. Everyone else in the Cave of Myriad Souls was beaming with joy and excitement. The two of us saw it. With Zhu Zi and Li Bieshua's intellect, they would definitely be able to think about it. How would the two of them be willing to take this lying down? Just as he said that, Qing Xian's heart moved. His gaze became much clearer as he looked outside of the vast habitat, only to see that in the east, a 100,000 feet long golden scroll was flying in the air towards the imperial city. It comes from Bailu Cave. It was the core of the Confucian faction, where the saint taught the Tao. The people here all had the ability to see through the void, and they all looked over. Then, a loud and majestic voice spread out from the distance. Today, I will tell all Confucians that there is the Qian Monster King Zhongsho who killed our Saint Dong. This person believes in the teachings of the common people's sect and believes in evil theories. In the 10 years that he was in power, he did all sorts of preposterous things, using his military power to cause the people to not be at ease. He also wanted to burn books and destroy Confucianism like the first emperor did. He is the enemy of our Confucian faction. That voice spread tens of thousands of miles and even directly spread into the vast habitat. Tai Huang's brow rose up, and then he laughed. Enemy of the Confucians? He is calling all Confucians to treat the Taishang as an enemy. His reputation as a muddle-headed tyrant was most likely going to be cemented. It is rare that fellow cultivator Zhu, she is furious and is prepared to fight to the death with Great Gone. Even within the Qian Empire, the people were rich and the political system was clean. However, it couldn't compare to the Confucians who could decide everything. How can we not be angry? Saint Dong died under Zhong Shou's sword, and we can't even revive him. This person is Zhu Zi's master. Qin Xian's face was cold, and his eyes were dark and unfathomable. His most beloved disciple also died at the hands of Zhong Shou. It would take 5,000 years for him to come back to life. How could he not hate and not be annoyed? After cultivating for so many years, his heart realm that was like an ancient well couldn't be maintained anymore. However, this time the 300,000 Dao soldiers that the Taishang ruler spent so much effort to raise were all destroyed in a day. At this moment, his heart is filled with pain, and he might not be able to agree to Zhu Zi's request. To wipe out the Qian, they had to rely on the strength of the Taishang dynasty. Within the Taoist faction, the souls of 200,000 disciples were heavily injured, and the rest needed to heal up. At this moment, although the Qian was an elite army, they had 3 million grade 3 soldiers. They also had 30,000 blood cloud cavalry. Martial arts was really popular in the country, especially after Zhong Shou's new policies. Recently, there were many experts. In times of danger, it wasn't difficult to summon another 2 million troops. If End Realm Venerables didn't attack and Saint Realm Venerables were suppressed by the Cloud World Will, then the main force of this battle could only rely on the Taishang. Emperor Yuanshun, he has no choice. If he isn't willing, then we could just change the emperor. Tailing Sect has been supporting Liao King. If we use this person to replace him, I think Zhu Zi will consider it carefully. Qin Xian mocked. This was his battle to take revenge for his disciple, which was why he couldn't allow any obstacles. Maybe he couldn't do anything to that Zhong Shou kid, but he could destroy his foundations. In the future, he would take down his country's strength step by step and steal his luck. Naturally, he could totally wipe him out. Moreover, his 300,000 Dao soldiers all died under Zhong Shou's sword. How can he not be angry? How can he not fear such a monster lord? Within the Taishang imperial capital, Fenghua Palace Administration Hall, Yin spat out a mouthful of fresh blood. The fresh red blood splattered on a white piece of paper on the table, looking really eye-catching. Yin still felt the vital energy in his chest rumbling, feeling really depressed and annoyed. His head felt heavy and dizzy. In that instance, he nearly lost consciousness on the spot. Till date, he still didn't dare to believe that the words he heard were true. He couldn't help but shout out fiercely. His eyes were about to pop out of their sockets. They were all wiped out? Our Taishang, 150,000 Xian Iron Trap soldiers, 80,000 Pinnacle Arrow God archers, 50,000 Yuanshan blood cavalry were all buried outside of the common people's path. They were all slain by that, Qian monster king, Zhong Shou, with the common people's sword formation. Chapter 1050. A huge pressure instantly enveloped the palace. Internal Affairs, Junior Supervisor Gao Ruo's body shook. He knew that Emperor Yuanshan was furious and even wanted to vent his anger on him. Being with a ruler was like being with a tiger. At this moment, even someone as close as him was terrified. Not daring to reply, Gao Ruo carefully placed a jade slip in front of the emperor's desk. Inu glanced at him coldly and snatched it away. A moment later, he roared out. The item in his hand was smashed into pieces. Within the jade letter was the scenes of the 300,000 Dao soldiers being smashed by the Heaven Path sword. At this moment, Inu's neck swelled up by several times. The aura of a king was gone, and he was like an injured lion. A long while later, he calmed down. Inyu took in a deep breath and stared furiously at Hamlin Academy Secretary's Washeen. A few days ago, you said that this battle was foolproof. Washeen's face was ashen white and cold sweat covered his face. He took in a deep breath until Inyu got impatient. Only then did he open his mouth once more. My sect Saint Dongzi was killed by Tsang Shengdao's common people's 7 swords. 8,000 years later, our Ming sect will face another calamity. No one expected that after the 10,000 celestial formation was completed, it would be so strong. No one expected that the common people's 7 swords could kill end realm experts. Before the great battle, no one had truly cared about the 7 swords that Shizi had left behind. No one expected that the common people's 7 swords along with the formation would be so perfect. Even someone as strong as Taisher couldn't do anything about it. Inyu scoffed coldly and then turned to Zhongshuan. Before this, Grand Teacher said that if there were no changes, we would definitely win. Zhongshuan laughed bitterly. His reputation was ruined in a day. A few years ago, he lost the bet with Kong Rui and misjudged Kong Yao. It caused this top commander of the Cloud World, the pillar of the future, to betray the Taishang. The Qian became the hegemony of the Southeast. This time, they were wrong again. This mistake ruined the 300,000 elite Dao soldiers that the Taishang had painstakingly nurtured. This is my fault. There should be a high-level arcane master who interfered with my divination and prevented me from predicting the future. I didn't expect Zhongshuo to be such a variable. Even end-realm cultivators weren't good at divination. Prying into the secrets of the heavens was naturally taboo by the heavens. Taking this path was basically giving up hope of immortality. Even 9,000 years ago, the person who had left life heavenly talismans in the various dojos of the Lingyun sect was so talented that he shocked the various worlds. Right now, it was still floating and struggling, unable to see the foundation of the great Tao. This was why all end-realm saint venerables could peek into the secrets of the heavens and predict the past and future. However, most of them avoided this Tao like the plague. It wasn't that he couldn't, but that he didn't dare and wasn't willing. In fact, before the battle began, he had also sensed that something was wrong. However, at that time, who would have thought that 9 end-realm saint venerables, 5 god venerables, and 1 god artifact would still be defeated? Skilled arcane master? I have never heard of such a person in Tsang Shengdao. Inyu frowned and suddenly thought about someone. Is it Kong Rui? Zhongshuan felt bitter and nodded his head with much difficulty. Within the Cloud World, there is only one person who could stand beside Zhongshuo. In just a few short years, who knew that this person's divination skills would improve so quickly, to be able to hide from his divination skills without him knowing? With his estimations, this person might not have predicted that Tsang Shengdao would definitely win. He just messed up the future and caused it to become chaotic. However, even if he only managed to do that, he was already really skilled. Such a cultivation improvement was like the heavens helping him. Heavens helping him? Zhongshuan's heart moved. He used Taishang's country luck to cultivate and solve the calamity. Kong Rui was the Qian Imperial Astronomer, Zhongshuo's most trusted arcane master, so he could also do that. However, he couldn't have done it so quickly. What was the reason? Traitor. Inyu scoffed coldly and smacked the corner of the table. The table in front of him nearly collapsed. Send my decree. All members of the Kong family will be stripped of their official positions and sent to the death jail. Those below 10 will be sent to the North Desolate Army and allowed to live and die on their own. If they aren't pardoned, they aren't allowed to return. He hated the Kong family to the core, so he dealt with them like this to vent his anger. It was also to punish the Kong family and suppress Kong Rui's mistakes. He had such a shocking talent, but he couldn't know about him and couldn't use him. There was also Kong Yao, who was a calamity descending on the world, an unlucky person. If he could have such a strong commander, then what would he have to worry about? He could be a pillar of an area. So what if there was a bloodbath? That was a calamity for other countries and a blessing for Taishang. Damn, how annoying. He could also be killed. Gao Hua, who was beside him, hurriedly called the Imperial Secretariat retainer who was waiting outside the hall to write the decree. Inyu still felt rage and hatred. However, at this moment, what he felt more was fear, and his body felt cold. Those 300,000 Dao soldiers were where his power lay, and were also his biggest trump card to restrict the aristocratic families in the country. Now that they were all wiped out, how was he going to suppress the country? Although the current Central Cloud continent was peaceful on the surface. However, there were numerous people and sects who were eyeing the newly appeared Mind Stone veins. They even purposely stirred up chaos and chaos. As for the few aristocratic families, as well as those officials who were in charge of a region, they all had ulterior motives and were secretly eyeing the throne of Great Shang. The current Taishang was obviously in a precarious situation. What should he do? His mind felt more and more dizzy. Inyu only felt his blood flow backward, and his body felt cold. Zhuoxin bowed and said, "Your Majesty, you don't have to worry. Although we lost this time, our Confucian faction Zhuzi's promise to ruler is still valid. Your Majesty is a wise ruler, but because of our mistakes, you lost troops. Our Confucian faction is grateful and ashamed." Inyu was slightly energized, but he didn't comment on Zhuoxin's words. The Confucian faction could be the pillar of Taishang, but they couldn't be allowed to do so. If they relied on their strength and were controlled by them, the Taishang would not be far from being wiped out. Just at this moment, Inyu and the few people in the hall all raised their heads. They saw a vast golden light sweep over. Let me tell all Confucians that there is the Qian Monster King Zhongsho. He has been in power for 10 years and has done all sorts of preposterous things, using his military to burn books and destroy Confucianism. He is the enemy of our Confucian faction. Enemy of Confucianism? Just as he was stunned, Inyu saw the golden light charge down into his hall. The 10,000-foot book shrunk to 2 feet and floated in front of him. The words within were different from what the voice said just now. "Send troops to the Qian?" Inyu felt his head swell up, a bad feeling building up in his chest. At this time, how would he have the mood to conquer the Qian? Even if he wanted to, he was powerless. Was he not going to bother about the chaotic situation in the country? Zhuoxin took a look at the golden document and was delighted. "This is a joyous matter. Your Majesty, please gather the troops of the various vassal states to personally attack Great Gan." Chapter 1051. This is a joyous matter. Your Majesty, please recruit troops from the various vassal states to personally attack the Qian. Inyu's eyes lit up as he looked at Zhuoxin with a meaningful gaze. This method was not bad and could kill 2 birds with 1 stone. It would solve the problem of troops attacking and also reduce the strength of the various vassal states. The latter's expression was even more respectful. "Our Taishang is righteous and also has Saint Zhuzi calling for us. Your Majesty only needs to issue an imperial edict, and the Yang and Zhu clans will not dare to refuse." To ascend to the throne, he needed the support of the Confucian faction. If he rejected, then he wouldn't just be going against the Taishang, but offending the entire Confucian faction and Zhuzi. During the common people's vast habitat battle, the Taishang had already bled and helped out. Now, it was the turn of these aristocratic families. Even if they don't reject Zhuzi and resist the call, they can ask for help from the Taoist faction. The 2 demon factions' Saint Venerables would be happy to see this happen. Inyu was already tempted. If he really wanted to personally attack the Qian, this might be the only way to protect the foundations of the Taishang. However, at this moment, he was still hesitating. As expected from my right-hand man, this plan is good, but I still need to consider it. You can leave first. Hanlin Academy Secretary Zhuoxin raised his head and was slightly surprised. Since Emperor Yuanshan ascended to the throne, he had always been a strong and decisive person. He ruled for 100 years and made decisions on his own. No matter whether his decisions were right or wrong, he was firm and firm. He was a rare wise ruler. Why was he hesitating today? Was there something wrong with what he said just now? However, in his eyes, it was the only feasible plan. He didn't say anything, bowing once more before pushing out of the hall. A moment later, only Emperor Yuanshan, Garuo, and Zhongshuan were left in the hearing hall. After keeping silent for a moment, Inu asked, "What does Grand Teacher think?" "This is the best plan. The Deqian is now a huge threat to our dynasty, and we have to get rid of him." Inu frowned. Zhuxin was talking about the good Dharma. However, that was not what he wanted to ask. "If it was a month ago, your majesty could have made an excuse. Today, Taishang has no room to refuse." Zhongxian's expression was solemn and grave. One school of Confucianism and one school of Taoism can decide the rise and fall of a country. It can even decide the change of the royal family. The last sentence was said bluntly, but it was like a clap of thunder in the hall, causing the faces of the other two to turn deathly white. Zhongxian's words could be said to have pierced the vital point. Inu was silent for a long time before he continued to ask, "I am not willing to be controlled by these people. I wonder if Imperial Preceptor has any good ideas to teach me?" Zhongxian smiled and said without hesitation, "After thinking about it, only the 12 bronze men left behind by the first emperor can help your majesty suppress the chaos. I have already found the location of the Qin emperor's main tomb. It probably wouldn't take long for it to be born. Our Taishang can think of a way to enter and take it out." Inu abruptly stood up, and his face was filled with uncontrollable wild joy. The rage he felt after hearing the bad news had dissipated by a little. There were 12 bronze men, 12 puppets that could fight against Peak Saint Realm, as well as the legacy and armor left by the Qin Emperor. The Taishang could naturally stand tall in the world and didn't need to care about the expressions of those few End Realm Saint Venerables. If we could take out the 12 bronze men, then naturally it would be best. I will leave it to Imperial Preceptor. He relaxed, and a smile finally appeared on Inu's face. "Imperial Preceptor, do you think I'll win or lose this time? That Deqian ruler has been labeled as the enemy of Confucianism. Everyone in the world can kill him. Even if that Deqian rose from a barbaric country, there's still many people who want to be educated. With Zhu Shang's decree, this country has lost its righteousness and people are divided. It is unavoidable that the morale of the army is low. As for our Taishang, we still have tens of millions of troops. With many aristocratic families working together, we can take out 200,000 Tao soldiers. The Taoist, Demon faction, and Confucian faction won't sit still and do nothing." Zhongshuan hesitated slightly. "With Kong Rui here, I can't predict the outcome of this battle. I can only use common sense to judge that our Taishang has a 90% chance of winning. As for the remaining 10%, it is hard to predict what Zhongshuo will do. However, to your majesty, no matter if we win or lose, it isn't a good thing. If we win, the aristocratic families will become stronger. If we lose, it will affect your majesty's prestige." Inu smiled when he heard this and said confidently, "Then, it is best if we win." He was a cultivator and didn't know all the details. Deqian's Donglin Cloud Continent and Huizhou Island weren't barbaric anymore. They were famous for being rich. It was said that not only were there many mines, but there was also a lot of fertile land. As long as a normal person was hardworking, they would be able to live a good life. Once they won and tossed this piece of dog bone out, there would be numerous aristocratic families and sects fighting for it. They could even think of a way to move the aristocratic families out of Taishang to solve the internal problems of the Taishang. 10 years later, they would be able to go all out to fight the enemy. It was killing many birds with one stone. He felt slightly uneasy. It was the same every time. He always thought that Zhongshuo was forced into despair. However, this person always used unexpected methods to turn the situation around. Would it be the same this time? He shook his head and laughed involuntarily. He had no choice in this battle. Using the strong to bully the weak, roughly calculating the difference in military strength was close to 6 times. As long as the general wasn't too useless, it was enough to crush him. Moreover, those few End Realm Saint Venerables definitely wouldn't allow a second defeat. Since that was the case, then what did he have to worry about? As for that Zhongshuo, was he the enemy of the Confucians? How pitiful. At this moment, Inu felt like they were in the same boat. As a ruler, no one understood how annoying the Confucian faction was more than him. They grasped the spring and autumn annals, but as long as they offended the Confucian faction and didn't follow their path, even if they were saint rulers, they would be cursed and scolded. He would be labeled as an incapable ruler. Now, Zhongsho was probably in deep trouble. At this moment, Zhongsho was still in the common people's vast habitat, holding the blood moon crescent blade in his hand. This was something from the sky-burning Liu family. After the person who wielded the weapon died, this blade naturally fell into his hands. It was actually not a man-made artifact, but a naturally formed piece of heaven-rank divine metal. Within, there was a naturally formed formation, such that if this blood moon blade wasn't refined, it would be a god weapon. Natural god weapon, as expected, amazing. Zhongsho praised. There were two laws within the blade. Accurately speaking, there were one and a half. One was the word hide, and the other half was the word borrow. The person who wielded the blade was able to hide his aura far better than normal cultivators. Due to the ability of the Blood Moon Blade, that person was able to avoid Shoguan and the other End Realm Saint Venerables. He was also able to control the power of the Tribulation to attack. Zhongsho didn't care about this god weapon. With the god-refined sword, he didn't need any other weapons. What he really cared about was the laws hidden within the artifact. Chapter 1052. The hide word was still okay, but the half of the borrow word surprised him. Speaking of which, it wasn't some heaven and earth source Grandao, but it was all really amazing. Especially the latter, borrowing the power of heaven and earth for one's own use. It was really overbearing. Along with the drive word god art that he grasped, they could complement one another. Speaking of which, it shouldn't be under Shuanya country ruler. If Lu Wushuang could comprehend this half of the god art, his combat strength would increase by close to double, so he definitely wouldn't let it go. He could just borrow the god artifact of his race. Only when both sides were opponents would he not be able to borrow it. This artifact is also one of the god artifacts of the 5 god halls, and probably belongs to a country ruler. Unfortunately, there's only half of the borrow word god art. It isn't even half. Zhongsho shook his head. He could comprehend some mysteries of heaven and earth, but he definitely couldn't use this artifact to prove his Tao. He could only merge these 2 god arts into his 10 extreme imperial Tao destruction sword formation, as well as the 3,000 star falling technique. It should be able to increase the strength of the sword formation, as well as the 3,000 star falling technique to another level. This artifact belonged to the Liu family, and he was the top heir of the sky-burning Liu family in name. So naturally, he would accept it. At the start, the spirit of the god artifact wanted to struggle, but when Zhongsho injected a few drops of essence blood in, it instantly became well-behaved. Zhongsho was like a hot knife through butter as he broke the restrictions within. Inside was a secret technique, using the Liu family sky-burning blood to refine and nurture. If other people obtained this artifact, they wouldn't be able to control it, and it would even fly back to its owner. Forcefully refining, it would only harm the artifact's spirit. However, he used the only pure blood of the Liu family to break the restrictions without any pressure at all. In just a moment, the god artifact changed owners. Zhongsho also casually tossed the Blood Moon blade to Chu Shui. Chu Shui had the combat martial body and was arranged by him to walk the Tao path of the 5 elements. She had a close relationship with the headless god beast protecting her. When she fought with others, she often needed to borrow strength. This artifact was quite suitable for her. Actually, Ruo Shui was the most suitable. Unfortunately, her cultivation was not high enough. Instead, her intelligence might be taken away by the divine artifact. He could think about it later. Chu Shui pursed her lips. She didn't really like this scimitar. She preferred using a sword or a straight blade. However, he also knew that if he accepted this saber, his strength would immediately be comparable to a Sage Realm cultivator. She didn't say anything else and smiled as she hugged her saber to her chest. With the combat martial body, she was naturally good at using any weapon. Like a grandmaster, she could also use this scimitar. It's truly inconceivable. It's a natural object that contains divine restrictions. It's practically perfect, naturally formed. It was even more perfect and flawless than the God-refined sword. No wonder God artifacts are so hard to craft, and there are so few of them. Even Shizi had only managed to forge 7 top-grade immortal weapons that had the potential to become divine artifacts after 1,000 years of hard work. Zhongshu took out a few more space artifacts. These were left behind by the Saint Realm cultivators who entered the vast habitat and were considered his spoils of war. As for the End Realm cultivators, Dong Zhongshu and Kunming's items were taken away by Zhu Zi and Qing Xian. Only world-stepping demon Lord left something behind. Unfortunately, the restrictions of the End Realm weren't something that he could break. Zhongshu knew his place and didn't fight for it. He forcefully opened those space artifacts one by one. Zhongshu's expression slowly became filled with joy. These people were mostly too confident and didn't think that this battle would be dangerous. They brought many treasures with them, amongst which there were dozens of heaven-grade spiritual materials, enough to craft a supreme celestial weapon. There were also 12 Saint Realm beast pellets. What was rare was that they were all different, and the abilities they contained were also different. These were the best materials to merge into a god artifact. Half of the materials for the 28 constellations were gathered in this battle. However, the material for the 3 enclosures and 4 divisions were still incomplete. Just as he was feeling delighted and excited, a cough spread out from the side. Zhongshu came back to his senses and saw that including Xiuguan, dozens of people were looking at him with weird expressions. The main hall of the Learning Palace was broken and was replaced by the Purple Gold Tower. This artifact could block off all abilities and techniques, so naturally it became the place where Tsang Shengdao usually discussed matters. The few End Realm Saint Venerables in Tsang Shengdao and the other Saint Realm Venerables gathered here to discuss the aftermath of the battle. Zhongshu felt bored and hid to the side to look at his gains. At this moment, he was noticed by others and smiled shamelessly. He kept the few space artifacts like nothing had happened. Long Ying and Ao Kuan didn't think much of it, but Tsang Shengdao and the others all sighed. This Tsang Shengdao's most outstanding disciple, even catching up to Shizi, had no intentions of interfering in Tsang Shengdao's internal matters. With such an attitude, it was clear that he wanted to exclude himself. The common people's path vast habitat probably came for friendship, causing everyone here to both love and hate him. Speaking of which, when Senior Shizi entered the cloud world, he didn't use the heaven-opening god artifact to merge with the Tao. He just wanted to take it out of the cloud world. Zhongshu just came back to his senses when he heard this and was shocked. He looked towards Xiuguan and Long Ying, who were discussing in shock. When Shizi tried to take out the heaven-opening god artifact, it wasn't to merge with the Tao, but just to take it out. That's right. Based on what my senior brother said, that heaven-opening god artifact was heavily damaged 100,000 years ago until now it hasn't recovered. Even if he took it out, he definitely wouldn't use it to merge with the Tao. Senior brother is proud, and in just 5,000 years, he reached half a step to true realm. Why would he be willing to use an external item to merge with the Tao? The moment these words were said, the eyes of everyone within the Golden Pagoda were filled with shock. Thinking about it, it did make sense. At that time, Shizi was invincible in the world. To be able to use his strength to suppress tens of thousands of worlds, his lifespan was limitless, and he wouldn't die. In fact, he didn't need to rush to take that final step and didn't need to use the power of the heaven-opening god artifact. What's the reason for that? This has to do with the Saint Agreement 10,000 years ago. At that time, the Saint Venerables worked together to seal the Cloud World's spiritual wave. This was what senior brother Shizi suggested. Zhongshu listened on quietly. He wasn't clear about this before, but after joining Tsang Shengdao, as a core disciple, he was able to read all the books in the common people's vast habitat and naturally knew the details. However, the reason why Shizi did that wasn't just to chase away the alien race. The biggest reason was because of that heaven-opening god artifact. Our cloud world spiritual wave being so strong. Do you all think that it is normal? Zhongshu shook his head. Naturally, it wasn't normal. They were both large worlds, but the Lu family's 9 worlds that had been run for tens of thousands of years could only support one god venerable. Here, just the broken and sealed cloud world had 7 end realm god venerables at the same time, and there were more and more experts. Chapter 1053. Such a large world like the cloud world was the only one in this region. There were also no other worlds like the cloud world with such a huge spiritual wave and so many minds. However, including those who disappeared, there were a total of 17 end realm cultivators since ancient times. Speaking of which, it was really weird. Back then, 10,000 years ago, the alien races were mostly wiped out. Just Shizi, Xiuguan, and the 8 end realm saint venerables of the Taoist faction and Confucian faction were enough to force back the 100 races. It was even to the extent that just Shizi alone could cause all the Xeno race to be extremely fearful. At that time, sealing the spiritual wave didn't make sense. Instead, the few factions of the cloud world fought with one another, causing the few end realm saint venerables to disappear. It gave the alien races a chance to take advantage of. Thus, after the Qin and Han dynasty, the alien races were in chaos. Ranwu King rose up and took control of the situation alone. Senior brother Shizi once told me that although the heaven-opening god artifact was a parasite in the cloud world, it could complement one another. However, 27,000 years ago, someone did something to the god artifact. Someone wanted the artifact to appear in the world early, so they activated the source of the cloud world. Half of it seeped out, which was why the cloud, desolate spiritual wave was so strong. Senior brother Shizi only noticed it when he stepped into half a step true realm. Thus, he used his strength to suppress the saint venerables of the cloud world to agree to seal the spiritual wave. This was also the reason why I, Song Shengdao, had grievances with the saint venerables of the various factions. Long Ying's expression was solemn, and his eyes were filled with surprise. He didn't expect that he would hear such secrets when he returned to the cloud world. He was enlightened. After all, he was someone from 10,000 years ago and had heard about the past. Then, senior brother Shizi studied artifact crafting and formations, and his cultivation improved. He noticed that it was useless even if he sealed the cloud world. That heaven-opening god artifact could swallow the flesh and blood of cultivators to nourish it, which was why the nether world was in chaos. The entire cloud world pretty much became a blood sacrifice for that artifact. I heard that even end-realm saint venerables can't avoid it under certain conditions. Zhong Shouxin thought of the nether maiden, Gong Shinran. Could it be that the underworld had interfered with the saint world because of this? What was going on with the chaos in the underworld? Xiuguan's last sentence was even more shocking. If this continues, the cloud world will be exhausted sooner or later, or even collapse. Thus, senior brother decided to take out the heaven-splitting divine artifact. In the end, there was that unprecedented battle where a total of 20 end realm and god venerables participated. There were countless others below the saint realm. Almost all of the Confucian, Taoist, and demon sects were involved. As for me, Xiuguan, I was blocked outside of the cloud world by Taishu and several other saint venerables. After much difficulty, he finally managed to severely injure it. Senior martial brother, Shizi, has already fallen. There was still no one in the room who spoke, because what they heard today was too shocking. Did the cloud world really become a blood sacrifice formation? Out of all of them, only Wei Su was really calm like he knew long ago. Aoe frowned, and after taking a deep breath, she asked, I heard that the Taoist faction's Cibei Taoist lord is a really merciful person. The Confucian faction Saint Sun Zi was a really cultured person and was also Shizi senior. If that is the case, then the 4 of them should be able to be convinced. It wasn't that she doubted Xiuguan's words, she just didn't understand. During the battle where Shizi died, the Confucian faction's Kong and Meng sages had already disappeared in the battle against the alien race. It was Sun Zi who passed down the Confucian faction teachings after the Shi Huang era. At that time, Sun Zi had already clashed with the new Confucian faction Saint Dongzi due to Great Han rejecting the 100 schools of thought. However, he still joined in to kill Shi Zi. Sun Zi's teachings felt that humans were evil by nature, that people were like water, able to carry the boat and also be able to sink it. He advocated the Confucian faction. Even a portion of the legalism legacy came from this saint venerable. Although his teachings weren't similar to Tsang Shengdao's, he didn't reject Tsang Shengdao when he was alive. There was definitely a reason why he joined in. The problem is that even if senior brother explains, will anyone believe him? He kept silent. If it was her, she probably wouldn't believe him either. Even if Shi Zi didn't use this item to enter the true realm, if he grasped this heaven-opening artifact, he wouldn't just suppress the cloud world. Even if someone knew the pros and cons, they might not be on the same side as Shi Zi. The heaven-opening artifact also meant the hope of entering the true realm. Based on what I know, Sibei Taoist Lord should have sent something. The reason why the Taoist faction split was because of this. He had different opinions from Qing Xian and Taiwan. Moreover, the Confucian faction Saint Sun Zi was lightly injured. Senior brother Shi Zi was taught by him and could be considered half a master. Even at the most dangerous moment, he couldn't have killed him. However, after that battle, less than 100 years later, Sun Zi fell. Someone used a top god weapon to shatter his undying Tao soul. He needed at least 100,000 years before he could be reunited. Even if he revived, he would forget the memories of his last life. Unless his cultivation recovered, it would be the same as being reborn. In the next few thousand years, the Taoist faction, Confucian faction, and Demon faction were all trying their best to find a way out. Even the Kinzo sect was the same. Even when the Buddhist faction entered the cloud world, they didn't go all out to resist. The people in the inner world were all smart people. While they were shocked, they also noticed that Xiuguan was hinting at something else. Senior brother, are you saying that the heaven-opening artifact was tampered with, senior brother Shi Zi was sealed, and even Sun Zi died because of someone else? Wasn't it Qing Xian? Qing Xian obtained the Tao 14,000 years ago during the Cloud Desolate era. It couldn't have been him who injected a forbidden technique into the heaven-opening artifact. Moreover, with his ability, he was only on the same level as Saint Venerable Sun Zi. He might even be weaker. Longing kept silent and didn't speak. He seemed to be thinking about someone, but he wasn't sure. A moment later, he looked deeply at Zhongshou. Zhongshou didn't notice anything as he was thinking about the future. The 10 shrines and 19 spiritual houses were all silent, and they took in very few disciples each year. At that time, there were rumors that the foundations of the various sects had moved to the outer region. Even when the God Emperor rose up and ruled millions of worlds, he didn't use the cloud world as his capital. Did it have something to do with that? Speaking of which, the spiritual wave this time is actually a huge calamity for our cloud world. Do we need to seal it once more? Or stop the heaven-opening artifact from being taken out? Xiuguan shook his head. I don't know what to do. We will just take it one step at a time. Seeing that everyone didn't understand, he explained, senior brother Shi Zi guessed that he wasn't the only one who reached half a step to true realm in this region. I used the Xianhuang great strength technique to prove the eternal path. I also felt that because I was worried from start to finish, I didn't dare to open senior brother Shi Zi's seal. Zhong Shouxin was shocked. Then, he looked outside of the vast habitat. A golden light rose into the air and shone for 1,000 miles. A moment later, he broke out into a laugh. The enemy of Confucianism. Chapter 1054. Naturally, everyone saw the scenes within the world. Apart from Zhongshou, everyone else had solemn expressions on their faces. Wei Su smiled bitterly. It seems like this Zhu Zi really isn't willing to let the matter rest. This time it is because of my Tsang Shengdao matter that I dragged down junior brother. The enemy of the Confucian faction is calling on all Confucians to attack. This Zhu Zi is really vicious. Zhongshou shook his head. He had expected such a reaction from Zhu Zi when he grasped the common people's 7 swords and was mentally prepared. It is okay. A few years ago when I returned to the Cloud World, Ye said, if our Qian wants to stabilize the southeast land of the central cloud continent, we will have to face the enemy head-on. We will have a head-on battle with the Taishang. This battle will happen sooner or later. It is just a few days earlier. De Qian entered the southeast barbarian land of the central cloud continent. Although they had won many battles and pretty much wiped out all the strong barbarian races there, De Qian didn't react. However, Great Shang didn't have no reaction. Emperor Yuanchun definitely wouldn't allow Great Gan to swallow up the southeast and become a huge problem. Although he couldn't even take care of himself, he had caused many problems during these years, sowing discord between the various races and helping troops in the dark. Sometimes, he would even directly send troops. It caused the land that De Qian occupied to be unable to calm down. After all, it was the central cloud continent and had a lot of prestige amongst the barbarians in the south. It had the ability to summon troops and threaten people. If De Qian wanted to gain a stable footing, they had to totally wipe out the prestige of the Taishang. Only then could they truly threaten the barbarians and even enter the mid-plains. Moreover, the 300,000 Dao soldiers of the Taishang were all slain by him in one sword. The current De Qian had a chance of winning. In fact, they had a high chance of winning. As for the enemy of the Confucians, they didn't care much. Anyways, the land that De Qian ruled was barbarian land, and there were pitifully few Confucians. However, the people present were not truly worried. Instead, they felt somewhat apologetic about it. After all, a war between big countries was not a small matter. No matter if they won or lost, people would be wiped out. Zhongshu had already sacrificed a lot for the common people's vast habitat. When he heard Zhongshu's words, he let out a sigh of relief. However, they all used weird gazes to look at the little puppy that was lying on Zhongshu's shoulder with a dispirited expression. Yuan Jing and Xuan Chuang had weird expressions on their faces, their eyebrows raised. The Sage King had descended to the world, but he was regarded as the enemy of Confucianism. That sage Zhu Zi had really done something stupid this time. Xiuguan said, End Realm Saint Venerables probably won't interfere in this battle, but we have to be wary. Since the common people's path vast habitat was already fine, then the 7 common people's sword artifacts didn't need to continue to suppress the common people's vast habitat. You can take this sword formation away. You can also use Wei Su and the others. Those 50,000 common people's mysterious dragon warriors will rush over to the Nani land in 10 days. Since Zhongshu had already clarified his relationship with Song Xingdao, then Song Xingdao would directly interfere in the Deqian War. Zhongshu frowned. Naturally, it was good to have the common people's 7 swords suppressing. It would prevent End Realm Saint Venerables from interfering. With the strength of the common people's sword formation, it would be able to restrict an End Realm expert outside of the vast habitat. Wei Su himself was an End Realm Saint Venerable. However, when he heard the last sentence, he felt that it wasn't appropriate. Just as he was about to reject, he heard Wei Su say, If I was the Taishang Emperor, before I personally lead the troops, I would summon the private armies of the vassal countries and aristocratic families to fight this war. Zhongshu was startled, and then his heart sank. He neglected the private armies of the vassal countries and aristocratic families. Speaking of which, this war matter wouldn't be as easy as he had imagined. Thinking about it, it was at least 6 to 7 times the difference in numbers. It was like a mountain pressing down on them. The main problem was the Dao soldiers. At this moment, De Qian was in the Cloud World, and their forces were still expanding. They only had less than 60,000 grade 4 Dao soldiers. As for the Taishang, even if the various vassal countries and aristocratic families held back, they could still mobilize more than 200,000 Dao soldiers. He couldn't help but sigh. This war really came at the wrong time. However, it might also be the best time. The Taishang was 10 times stronger than the Qian. A few years later, who knows how strong they would be. With how valiant Emperor Yuanchun was, maybe he would be able to recover his strength. For this war, he was planning to slowly deal with the Taishang. In the south, he would drag down the Taishang army. He would drag it out until the Taishang was exhausted and war broke out in the country. The South had many rebellions and millions of people died each year. However, the Deqian couldn't back out just like that. It was better to deal with the pain quickly. He needed a war to hurt the Taishang such that they could only turtle back and let the South settle down. However, it seemed like he was thinking too much. After this discussion, Zhongsho was totally distracted and didn't bother about the discussions of the people in the tower. It was just some words of gratitude towards Alcuin and Dragon Shadow. Then, it was about the compensation for the dead disciples and the rebuilding of the vast habitat. The spiritual wave is rising. Song Xingdao, was prepared to sit back and watch the changes in the cloud world. However, today, Yuan Jing and Xian Shuang both reached the end realm. Wei Su was lucky enough to go through his tribulation today. Although Song Xingdao hasn't recovered to his peak, he has the ability to fight. However, he will be the focus of the various sections. Even if he doesn't do anything, many people will plot against him. The reason why Xiaoguan told all of you these secrets is to make all of you wary. Only what Xiaoguan said entered Zhongsho's ears. He didn't care about the rest. In less than 4 hours, the crowd had scattered one after another. Zhongshoxin was anxious and rushed back to Gantian Mountain. He hadn't seen Xianyuan Irin and Kong Yao for a few years. Also, he hadn't seen his kids since he was born. Zhongsho missed them a lot. Dozens of days after he returned, he suppressed that sense of urgency. At this moment, naturally, he couldn't stop himself. However, before he returned, there was still a small puppy that he needed to deal with. Since it wanted to enter Zhongsho's soul ocean void space and was rejected by Zhongsho, Sherry had been really unhappy. It would often bare its fangs and claws at him to show its unhappiness. When it was frustrated, it would bite his sleeves. Can entering the white hole Dharma help you prove your Tao? If it is too late, you won't be able to beat it in the future? Is it that Black Qilin? You weren't its opponent to begin with, okay? This is a matter of life and death. You can't be angry. Aren't you afraid of being surrounded by evil energy and dying? You really don't know your place and don't know what is good for you. Think carefully. Maybe in a few decades, the Deqian country will be broken and people will die. At that time, how will there be any king path energy for you to absorb? Who knows? Maybe I, Zhongsho, will be the most vicious and violent ruler in history. The entire Confucian faction had already labeled him as an incapable ruler. Actually, he didn't hesitate. He was annoyed by Sherry. Zhongsho used a spell to keep this puppy into his soul ocean dharma. However, before he was able to see the changes in his soul ocean, he heard its Song Xingdao disciple send him news. The Sword Sect's sect master is here to visit. Chapter 1055. The Kenzo sect's sect leader is visiting. Zhongsho wasn't surprised, but he also felt shocked. What he wasn't surprised about was that after the common people's vast habitat battle, the Sword Sect and Buddhist sect who had been sitting on the sidelines would react. What he was shocked about was that the first to visit wasn't the Buddhist sect, but the Kenzo sect. However, the arrival of the Kenzo sect's sect leader was naturally received by Wei Su, who was also the sect leader. The one who truly wanted a Zhongsho was the Sword Palace head Lingqian. When Zhongsho walked outside of the vast habitat, he saw the middle-aged man who left a deep impression on him, standing in the land of grievances and grievances. His right index finger was actually deducing the heaven path sword intent that was left here. Initial God Realm. A glow flashed in Samuraim's eyes. He remembered that the last time they met, this person was just gray 9. His accumulation was really great. There was no better person than him. Even Shui Lingbo couldn't compare to him. Beside this person, there were 2 people. One of them was Ruo Tao, who smiled and nodded towards him. He didn't recognize the other person. He was around 30 years old, dressed in Taoist attire, but he looked really otherworldly. At this moment, he looked over with deep meaning. To be able to meet an old friend, Zhongsho was naturally delighted. However, he knew that Lingqian definitely had an important matter to attend to, which was why after greeting him, he was all ears. Lingqian, on the other hand, was still as respectful towards him as before. For Tai Chi, that kid, to have such achievements, I really have to thank the ruler. Although they hadn't met in a few years, just from the few words spread over from the Yuanren world, one could tell that the current Tai Chi was different from before. He had removed all his heart barriers, like a true phoenix charging into the heavens. Zhongsho smiled and didn't mind. His body slightly moved to the side to express that he didn't dare to accept it. Senior, you are thanking the wrong person. This is because Tai Chi is talented and his personality can be nurtured. It has nothing to do with me. Lingchen bowed and then went into the main topic. 10 days ago, I definitely didn't expect that Song Shengdao would be able to pass this calamity. Not only was the vast habitat safe, but he also killed 3 End Realm Saint Venerables. I also didn't expect that the ruler would be the future Buddha, Nirvana Buddha, Unlimited Beginning, and End Buddha. He had guessed that Zhongsho had a close relationship with Song Shengdao. However, he didn't expect that Zhongsho would have such a relationship with him, would have such a relationship with Buddha S's. If Zhongsho was willing, probably in 1,000 years, he would be able to enter the glass world and become the Buddha head respected by billions of Buddhas. S sect S's. Zhongsho sighed without any sincerity. He avoided talking about the future Buddha, Nirvana Buddha, Unlimited Beginning, and End Buddha, and acted like he didn't hear anything. He didn't even think about how to deal with it. Lingchen broke out into a laugh, and his expression turned solemn. After this battle, Song Shengdao's sect has 4 End Realm Saint Venerables. They are undoubtedly the top sect in the cloud world. Ruler is Song Shengdao's second-generation direct disciple. Not long later, the world will know about it. What are you planning to do in the future? Zhongsho's expression instantly became serious. Even if one didn't use their heels to guess, they would know that the reason why they came to the common people's vast habitat was because of Lingchen's last sentence. Senior Ling, if we compare the cloud world to a cake, then this cake is a little too small and there isn't enough for everyone to share. Seeing that the 3 of them were at a loss, their eyes filled with confusion, Zhongsho couldn't help but laugh, feeling delighted in his heart. So, instead of fighting for it, why don't we make this cake bigger together until everyone is satisfied? Including Ruotao, a bright glow appeared in the eyes of the 3 of them. Zhongsho knew that this sentence wasn't enough to make the Kinzo sect satisfied. He continued, I have always believed in using the law to rule the country. Those who do well will be rewarded, and those who do wrong will be punished. To make all the people in the country stay alone, we need to keep our promises and be fair. Be it Song Shengdao, or the Kinzo sect, or the Buddhist faction, within my territory, there is no exception. I also know the theory of sharing benefits. I don't care about politics, and everything is decided by the meeting hall and the cabinet. In the future, this policy will be the norm. What does your Kinzo sect have to worry about? His last sentence was filled with a mocking intent. Ling Chun didn't care at all, instead smiling. As expected from a ruler who is rarely seen in the cloud world in 10,000 years. With the ruler's words, the entire Kinzo sect naturally doesn't need to worry anymore. To be able to meet the ruler is the fortune of our Kinzo sect. Ruler? Ha! Zhongsho laughed, mocking himself. I am now the enemy of the Confucian faction. Within the cloud world, everyone knows that I am a tyrannical ruler. Although the Confucian faction controls the spring and autumn period, we can't shut the mouths of everyone. Ling Chun shook his head and said seriously, Zhu Zi's decree has been passed down, and the Taishan will definitely attack. This is an unjust war. Our Kinzo sect and the Qian are like lips and teeth, and our interests are linked. Although our Kinzo sect is the weakest out of the 6 factions of the cloud world, we definitely can't sit still and do nothing. 10 days later, we will send the 40,000 Moyang sword cavalry of our Kinzo sect to listen to the ruler's orders. Zhongsho's brows rose up, looking over in shock. This time, he was really surprised. Even if he added in the 40,000 Moyang sword cavalry of the Kinzo sect, the difference in numbers was still more than 5 times. Before the outcome was decided, the Kinzo sect actually placed such a huge bet on him. However, Ling Chen laughed. This old man trusts the ruler and Commander Kong. The Kinzo sect can't interfere in the battle of the common people's vast habitat. The Kinzo sect can't sit still and do nothing when the Taishang attacks the Deqian. Ruler probably doesn't know, but 3 days ago, our Kinzo sect was prepared to move out of the cloud world. If Tsang Shengdao loses, our Kinzo sect alone won't be able to save the cloud world. If they stayed out of it, the Kinzo sect wouldn't suffer any losses. However, it would definitely affect the relationship between the Kinzo sect and Zhongshou. If Zhongshou didn't win, then it was okay. However, if he did, in the future, even if Zhongshou rewarded him, he would strengthen Tsang Shengdao's power and influence within Deqian. To the Kinzo sect, this would be the greatest loss. When Zhongshou heard that, he instantly smiled. Just at this moment, he saw a golden glow appear between the brows of Taoist Chu Chun beside Ling Chun. Like an eye, it looked over from afar. Energy viewing technique? Zhongshou frowned unhappily. Looking at the situation, it was a top energy viewing technique. What was the Kinzo sect doing? Following which, he understood. Although the Kinzo sect had placed a heavy bet on him, they still weren't at ease, which was why there were experts who were good at divination following him over. Ling Chen also noticed his expression was awkward, his face turning green as he stopped. Huarua, don't be rude in front of the ruler. That Taoist Chu Chun was still expressionless. I had no choice. The king energy of the ruler is something I can't see with normal methods. His voice stopped halfway. That Huarua screamed out in pain as blood dripped out from the center of his brows. Huarua face-bombed, his eyes filled with disbelief. Saint King energy, dragon and phoenix roaring. It is actually the descent of the Saint King. Chapter 10:56. Saint King energy, dragon and phoenix roaring. It is the descent of a Saint King. How is that possible? 10,000 years after the cloud desolate era, there is still a Saint King? No, it can't be wrong. If it wasn't for the Saint King energy, if it wasn't for the dragon and phoenix roaring, how could it hurt the god's eye? That Huarong muttered to himself hysterically. The two people beside him were startled as they looked at Zhongshou, their eyes filled with confusion. Zhongshou was even more unhappy. No one would be in a good mood after having their fate and destiny peeked at. He scoffed coldly, only to see Huarua's brow explode, fresh blood spurting out. Even the hand that was holding his forehead couldn't stop it and was dyed red. Qilin is the Saint Beast Fire Qilin. Qilin accompanying him. Country fate is fire. He is undoubtedly the Saint Ruler. Huarua muttered softly, his body stumbling. He actually fell to the ground, his face ashen white. Zhongshou thought back to when Kong Rue used the one king divination coin to peek at his fate. It was a similar situation. However, this Huarua didn't have a single treasure of the Wind King. After the matter, Kong Rue said that he lost 100 years of lifespan that time. This was also due to the one king divination coin helping him block the tribulation. Who knows what kind of situation the person in front of him was in? Thinking about that, Zhong Shaxin felt much better. He didn't pity him at all, instead gloating. He didn't plan to give Ling Chen any more face, cupping his fist as a way of saying goodbye before leaving. He was anxious to return home. Since his reply had already satisfied the Kinzo sect, there was no need for him to chat with these few people. Ling Chen smiled bitterly, bowing apologetically before grabbing Huarua's arm. A streak of true qi injected in to heal such a fellow sect member who was good at divination. Following which he was shocked. The current Huarua not only had his god's eye that he cultivated for hundreds of years been destroyed, all the meridians in his body were nearly broken. Although the divination path was magical, it made one wary and stay far away from it. To pry into the mystery, the heavenly punishment was actually so severe. After stabilizing Huarua's injuries, Ling Chen once again looked at the streak of light Zhongshou had left. At this moment, Ruo Tao was still in a daze. With the arrival of the sage monarch, Hua Ruo's injuries cannot be faked. The demon king, the demon lord, the muddle-headed ruler, and the enemy of the Confucian school, was actually the sage king of this world? How interesting. Ruo Tao was awakened by Ling Chen's words. He took a deep breath and said, "Even so, he may not be the future godly emperor that person spoke of." He was on good terms with Zhong Shou and admired Zhong Shou's martial arts and character. Naturally, he hoped that the Kinzo sect would be close to the Qian. However, he didn't want to affect the sect's judgment because of his own reasons. Regardless of whether he is the Shen Huang or not, just the two words Holy King alone is enough for the Kinzo sect to disregard everything and support him with all our strength. Ling Chen shook his head. However, it is a little boring. My Kinzo sect placed a huge bet this time. I originally thought that this battle would be soul-stirring. It was frightening. Who knew that before the battle even started, the outcome was already decided? That Zhu Zi and Qing Xian really chose the wrong opponent this time. After saying that, he looked at Hua Ruo, who had fainted in his hands and sighed. Not only was he heavily injured, but his junior brother's life force was also reduced by 50%. His lifespan, which wasn't much to begin with, was now only left with half. However, today's matter was caused by Hua Ruo, so he really couldn't blame Zhong Shou. Just as Ling Qian was worrying about Zhong Shou's expression changed. At a place just 1,000 miles away from the common people's vast habitat, a few old monks were looking at Zhong Shou's streak of light. A white jade bowl filled with Sanskrit words hung in the air. Thousands of auspicious energy descended and covered the area. There were 4 people within. One was Zifang, who had returned to the cloud world, and the other was Ling Hai from Jianan Temple. Both of their identities weren't small in the cloud world. However, at this moment, their expressions were really solemn and respectful, acting like little monks. Between the two of them, the one on the left was Lanka, who Zhong Shou had met before. The other old monk was one of the world protectors of the cloud world. His name was Ji Luan. At this moment, there were numerous Sanskrit words gathering in front of Lanka. Looking from afar, it looked like a pair of giant eyes. This eye was filled with boundless divine power, giving off an incomparably dignified feeling. In just a moment, the pair of Buddha eyes had already faded away. As for the Sanskrit characters, they disappeared without a trace. Is this kid really the unlimited beginning and end, the future Buddha? Ling Hai asked eagerly. Just now, Lanka used a secret technique to borrow the power of the Buddha ancestor from tens of thousands of worlds away. He knew that the outcome wouldn't be wrong. It is indeed the unlimited beginning and end. Lanka's expression was solemn as he nodded his head. Just now, I did see unlimited light and endless darkness on his body. Unlimited light and endless darkness. He didn't expect that Zhong Shou, who brought 70 worlds to the Buddhist faction and a large number of believers, was actually the future Buddha of the Buddhist faction. 5 years ago, I saw him use the unlimited beginning and end technique. He is definitely the person who followed the Buddha's decree. Unfortunately, he is limited by his identity as a world protector. When Ji Luan said this, he scoffed coldly and was really unhappy. He had reminded him about this long ago and tried to find out, but Ling Hai couldn't understand. This made him anxious for a full 5 years because of this matter. The world protector couldn't interfere in cloud world matters. Only when the cloud world was in danger could he attack. However, at this moment, since Zhong Shou revealed his identity, then there was nothing he could do. Ling Hai felt slightly awkward and avoided Ji Luan's scolding gaze. He frowned. Then, what is going on with Zhao Yanran? She also used the unlimited beginning and end ability. This girl is Zhong Shou's reverse cauldron, and it isn't surprising that she was reflected into his soul ocean void ocean. Zifang replied and consoled Jilin. This kid is so talented, so how would Sang Shengdao give up on him so easily? Or maybe Shouguan did something to it, such that we couldn't find out. That is also an unknown matter. Ling Hai smiled bitterly. He really didn't expect that. Lanka felt that it made sense. If Xiaoguan was really like what the rumors said and used the Xianhuang great strength technique to prove the eternal Tao, then he would definitely be someone on the same level as the Buddha. If this person wanted to hide from the eyes and ears of the Buddhist faction, it would be really easy. That was definitely the case. Jilin didn't buy it. Instead, he was even more unhappy as he stared furiously at Zifang. You have followed him to expand and have worked with him for many years. Didn't you notice anything weird? If not for the unlimited Buddha Lord using the unlimited beginning and end ability to injure the Taisher Demon Lord, the unlimited Buddha Lord would have died. Would our Buddhist faction have to wait a few thousand years before we realize it was him? Zifang was speechless and felt really ashamed. He really didn't expect or notice that Zhongsho had a connection with the unlimited Buddha Lord. Chapter 1057. Since things have reached such a stage, what is the point of saying all this? Lanka sighed. Luckily, our Buddhist faction didn't become enemies with the future Buddha. Instead, it helped us a lot. Zifang felt really fortunate, but he didn't dare to take the credit. This is because the future Buddha is fair in his dealings and is talented. He is worth our help. I followed him, and in just a short few years, we added dozens of places to spread our religion. As expected, the Buddha is someone who can strengthen our Buddhist faction. Lanka shook his head and didn't agree or disagree. Today was filled with both joy and sadness. After learning that Zhongsho was the unlimited Buddha that they had been searching for, naturally, it was a joyous matter. However, this person was Tsang Shengdao's second-generation direct disciple, the celestial lord of the Qian celestial dynasty, the top heir of the sky-burning Liu family. No matter which identity it was a headache, much less when they were all gathered together. He really couldn't think of a reason why Zhongsho would join the Buddhist faction. This was a tragedy, a huge tragedy. He scratched his head helplessly and asked, is the Confucian faction saying that the unlimited Buddha is the enemy of the Confucians? What do you all think? Zhilun instantly kept silent. This matter wasn't something that he could participate in, even if he was the one who suggested it. Luckily, there is still Zifang. He knows that the Deqian ruler is our unlimited Buddha, but he still did that. He is becoming enemies with our Buddhist faction. The problem is that the Buddha hasn't joined yet, so we can't blame him. We can't blame him, but we can interfere. Since our Buddhist faction and the Deqian are exploring the outer region, we are connected and have the same interests. If we interfere, who can say anything? Linghai scoffed coldly, his eyes filled with killing intent. It is just icing on the cake. Why not send charcoal in the snow? It is best if the Deqian can't take it anymore. The moment he said this, Linghai looked towards the entrance of the common people's vast habitat. Lingxin turned around and looked over with a smile that didn't look like a smile. His face was filled with deep meaning. Daoist Linghai's heart skipped a beat, and he immediately changed his words. It's better to directly intervene. Linghai feels that something is wrong. As he spoke, Linghai also fell into deep thought. Just now, it was the Buddha's heart of tranquil glaze that he had cultivated for thousands of years that warned him. He also felt that it was quite strange. Looking at Ling Chen's expression, it was clear that he didn't have any hesitation at all. He knew that the Kinzo sect was here to bet heavily on Zhongsho. Just what did the two of them talk about to give Ling Chen such confidence? The Kinzo sect's palace master seemed to be reminding them. He stole a glance at Ji Luan's expression and saw that the latter seemed to have heaved a sigh of relief after he finished speaking. He couldn't help but find it weird as he thought back to the scene of Hua Ruo bleeding from her forehead. I remember that this Hua Ruo is a famous mathematician in the Kinzo sect. That's right. This person has cultivated the divine, prying heavenly eye for 700 years. His Tao of divination was far inferior to Zhongxian's. His ability to look at energy is one of the top in the cloud world. Zifang was also filled with doubt. What did this Huarua see on Zhongsho's body to cause his god, I to bleed, like it was totally destroyed? So badly injured that she fainted? Ji Luan chanted softly and thought back to the fire Qilin that made thousands of purple Qilin flame spear cavalry bow down. This was because today he could be considered a part of the Cloud World will. This was why he could clearly see the pure, white energy pillar that charged into the sky. He thought to himself that he was still okay. The other few colleagues were probably as anxious as ants in a pod, not knowing what to do. After meeting up with Chu Shui, Zhongshou drove his sword and headed east. In the outer region void, he wasn't restricted by laws. In a day, he could cross the world river and cross dozens of worlds. In Yuanren world, he could cross 100,000 miles in 4 hours from Tianan to Tianbei. However, he couldn't do that in the cloud world. His speed was greatly restricted. At this moment, Zhongshou was distracted. At this moment, an item appeared in his hand. It was a jade-colored treasure plate. On it, there was a dense and profound talisman formation drawn on it. The material was really good. Even if it was used to craft a high-grade celestial artifact, it was enough. At this moment, it was crafted into a formation artifact and could only be used 3 times. This was a space formation plate that allowed cultivators to cross over even if they were billions of worlds away. The spiritual sense within belonged to Xiuguan. This was something that Xiuguan asked Chu Shui to pass to him, something that he had to bring with him. Although you have the identity of the top heir of the sky-burning empire, be it the person who stole the god artifact or the Taisher demon lord, you won't fear them. I can't be by your side all the time, so I can only give you this artifact. If you want to be in danger, use your spiritual sense to summon me. Even if you are billions of worlds away, I will be able to help you in a fraction of a second. However, if Taisher wants to kill you, he will definitely do it with lightning speed. Junior nephew, you still need to work hard and you must be careful. After obtaining this formation plate, Zhongshou wasn't happy at all. Instead, he felt a little bitter. In other words, when Taisher and that person attacked, if he couldn't even block for a fraction of a second, he would definitely die. The Buddhist faction used a flick of a finger as 60 seconds. A fraction of a second seemed really short. However, to an End Realm Saint Venerable, it was enough to crush him. He only felt heavy pressure. Within the area that Deqian could reach, he still had some confidence. However, outside of Deqian, he had to be careful. However, he didn't regret it. The battle for the Tao was just so cruel. Since he saw the chance, he couldn't miss it. Once this person reached half a step to true realm, then no matter how much he paid, he wouldn't be able to save him. Chu Shui brought him not only Xiuguan's words, but also Long Ying's instructions. The world's shocking art is the pinnacle of the Tao, merging all techniques into one. The heavens are jealous of this technique, and you can't easily reveal it to others. Since you have used the unlimited beginning and end ability, then use this technique as a cover. Remember, Zhongshou couldn't help but think back to Long Ying's weird expression. It was like he wanted to say something but stopped, like he had something to say to him but was worried about something. As expected, it was a little weird. Zhongshou shook his head. Long Ying was in the cloud world and wouldn't leave anytime soon. It wouldn't be too late to ask his master about it in a few days. He shot out a spell, and Zhongshou directly refined the jade plate into his soul ocean. This was so that when he was attacked, he could contact Xiuguan in the quickest way. Then, Zhongshou split a portion of his attention to observe the black and white Dharma. The giant black and white holes hung behind his true image Dharma body and spun at the same time. However, compared to before, it was obviously different. However, before he was able to take a close look, his heart moved and he felt a sense of danger. He couldn't help but feel confused. Who was it that dared to attack him in the cloud world? Looking at the situation, it didn't look like those few End Realm Saint Venerables. Chapter 1058. His spiritual sense retracted from his soul ocean. Zhongshou heard Chu Shui holler in rage. The blood-red crescent blade brought with it a vast cold current as it swept across the sky. Hundreds of miles of cloud ocean froze, and large chunks of it fell towards the cloud ocean abyss. One of Chu Shui's 5 protector beasts, the Xianming turtle, roared out. It caused numerous ice shields to form in the air. The first thing that Chu Shui thought about was Zhong Shou's safety. Using the Blood Moon Blade, this strike had the strength of Saint Realm, but it was mostly used for defense. Pretty much all the ice shields were gathered in front of Zhong Shou's body. However, there was a small silver sword light that was extremely sharp, piercing through the ice shields that were as tough as celestial treasures, causing ice shards and dust to fill the air. Gong Yuan, Zhong Shou's pupils constricted. Although he didn't see the person, he was familiar with this spiritual sense. He instinctively remembered that this person was wiped out because of him. In the future, he was even on the same level as the God Emperor. At this moment, he drove the sword and was unstoppable. Zhong Shou's brow rose up, and he was about to attack. A golden light flew out from his sleeves. It was little gold. It turned into a smaller version of Zhong Shou, holding the God-refined sword. The 30,000-foot lightning wings on its back flew through the air. There was a loud dang, just as the silver sword light broke through the last layer of ice shield. Little Gold's God-refined sword brought along the 6 long-winged beasts and slashed over. Little Gold's body was tossed several miles away. However, the silver sword light was also sent flying. In just a moment, Xiao Jin stabilized his figure, and between his brows, he was in high spirits, revealing a hint of arrogance. Zhong Shou was shocked. Wei Su's end realm blood merged with it so quickly. Then, he understood that Wei Su must have refined his life essence blood such that Little Gold could easily absorb it. This sword had at least 90% of Zhong Shou's strength. It was pretty much a clone with 90% of his combat strength. Naturally, it didn't include the buffs from King Path martial arts. Since he had the blue fire, Xian turtle, and Hanshi obtained numerous beast pellets, it had greatly evolved. Little Gold's combat strength was slowly unable to keep up. Zhong Shou's used. Only after he swallowed the formless god demon energy pellet and obtained Wei Su's essence blood and the mirror Dao did he feel good. The combination of formless, mimicry, and mirror increased Little Gold's mimicry ability by several times. Zhong Shou laughed, his eyes filled with joy. For Little Gold to have such combat strength, even if it wasn't able to get any more benefits from Tsang Xingdao, it was worth it. Only now did he look towards his sword. After it was forced back, it was forced by Chu Shui's blood blade light, spinning and slashing in the air. It tried to break free, but was restricted by Chu Shui's 5-element spiritual techniques. God weapon. It was a god sword that was sealed, otherwise it wouldn't be able to last for so long under Chu Shui's blade. No wonder Gong Yuan dared to try to assassinate him. Zhong Shou didn't bother, his spiritual sense spreading out to search for where Gong Yuan was. The sword was here, so the person who drove it was definitely within 1,000 miles. His spiritual sense swept 1,000 miles of land, not even letting go of the outer region void. However, moments later, Zhong Shou's eyes were filled with shock. Within this 1,000 miles, he actually couldn't find any traces of Gong Yuan. He waved his sleeves, and dozens of silver lights spread out, flying in all directions. They were the Saint Fire Soldier ants under Hanshi. Each one was comparable to a celestial realm cultivator. Each one could allow Zhong Shou's spiritual sense to expand 600 miles. At the same time, the 108 star Dao seeds that had increased to 108 small cycle of days also spread out. Zhong Shou closed his eyes and stood in the air. A moment later, he sensed something. He opened his eyes, and a spiritual light flashed in his eyes. With a thought, he summoned a Saint Fire Silver ant that was nearly slashed down by a sword light to the front of him. His body flashed once more, and he used the instant space teleportation technique to arrive at where the silver ant was attacked. He didn't bother to investigate. Zhong Shou directly used the god-refined sword that had fallen back to supreme celestial weapon level to slash down, bringing with it a sky full of stars. 3,000 stars falling. Then, with a loud explosion, all matter within 600 miles of space was destroyed. Only a single figure remained, appearing from the void. He scoffed and actually advanced instead of retreating. All of a sudden, A bright silver sword shadow broke through the void and pierced toward Yiqingyu. It was straightforward, but it was hard to see, like it was there, but not there. It gave one a feeling of uncertainty, but it was also so sharp. As for the silver sword, it was similar to the sword from before. Mother and Sun God weapon. The one just now was the Sun sword. At this moment, Gong Yuan's hand was the mother sword. There is only one mother sword, but who knew how many Sun swords there were? It is impolite not to return the favor. Zhongshou also merged with his body and drove the sword. Man and sword merged into one, bringing with them an unlimited amount of light as he charged forwards. Being challenged by a sword, as a swordsman, how would he back off? The entire sky was covered in a white glow, hard to see with the naked eye. It wasn't until the clanging of the sword that the battle ended. At this moment, Gong Yuan's chest was dyed red with fresh blood. Zhongshou stood solemnly in the air, deep in thought as he looked at his right arm, at the wound that was only skin deep. Naturally, he won in this sword clash. However, the sword intent seeped into his body, and he was unable to chase. He used the endless darkness to swallow and dissolve it bit by bit. Illusionary celestial slaying technique. Zhongshou raised his brow, his gaze sharp and threatening. You cultivate the illusionary Tao. Just now, a large portion of the unlimited sword was turned into illusionary and slashed into the air. Gong Yuan didn't reply, using the help of the god weapon to flee thousands of miles away. Shuyan's sect is wiped out, and we can't live under the same sky. One day, I will kill you with my sword. His tone was firm and filled with bone-deep hatred. However, at this moment, another blood-red saber light exploded in the void. Gong Yuan's voice stopped. He and his sword flashed dozens of times before he was able to avoid being killed by the blade light. However, as that person was flying away, a section of his leg was chopped off. Chu Shui appeared, looking at Gong Yuan's back view. Her face was filled with frustration and annoyance. Just now, he was so close to slaying this despicable young Taoist under his blade. Zhongshou's mouth opened wide, unable to close. His face was filled with shock. Looking closely, he understood the reason. Using the illusionary technique of the green horn dragon, with the support of the 5 god beasts, Chu Shui formed a really realistic clone to tangle with the sun sword. She herself was totally silent as she sneaked over. Using the hide word technique of the blood moon blade, she hid her body. Then, when Gong Yuan was about to flee, she exploded out. The damage that this blade dealt to Gong Yuan far exceeded that of his unlimited light ability. Was this still Chu Shui? That silly brat who allowed him to toy with her. Chapter 1059. Hiding his head and showing his tail, he doesn't even dare to have a proper battle. Chu Shui clenched her fists angrily. Looking behind her, the god weapon sun sword was nowhere to be seen. She instantly felt more and more annoyed. In a head-on battle, Gong Yuan definitely wasn't her match. However, he was like a slippery loach that she couldn't grab and couldn't hold. I was just a little bit away. It's the heaven movement mother and sun sword. I can't grab it. That sun sword was to bait him into an ambush. Now that he couldn't achieve his goal, naturally, he would flee far away. Zhongshou shook his head to himself. In the future, the name of this set of swords was really famous, shocking an era. This sword traveled the world, and nothing could stop it. The real and illusionary Tao and the movement word technique were a match made in heaven. This was why Gong Yuan was able to go up against the God Emperor's million-strong army alone. One man and one sword. He was comparable to the God Emperor. Although that set of mother and son swords wasn't totally unsealed, it was already really extraordinary. Due to the seal, it was easier to use than Chu Shui's Blood Moon Blade. The ability of this sword was something that even his instant space dragon pellet and world-burning blood eyes couldn't stop. Chu Shui was able to injure him because of her combat martial body and her unparalleled reaction prediction ability. She was able to catch the trajectory of this person. If it was someone else, even if their cultivation was close to double that of Gong Yuan, they wouldn't be able to do anything. Also, this person's cultivation speed was really shocking. He had already charged into Celestial Realm. Apart from the Heaven Movement Mother and Sun swords, there should be another treasure to be able to block his sword and not die. Who knows where Gong Yuan got these treasures and the real and illusionary celestial slaying technique legacy. The last time they met, this person's strength was only grade 7. He also didn't have such a sword technique that could go up against him. It's only been 5 years. Is he sacrificing his lifespan? Zhongshou squinted and was in deep thought. He obtained the complete source life spirit breathing technique legacy and could sense life force. After Gong Yuan stepped into Celestial Realm, he should be able to live for at least 4,500 years. But from the looks of it, he was at most 300 years old. However, Zhongshou had a symbiotic holy fire ant, so he had nothing to fear. As for this person, once his 300 years of lifespan was used up, he would die. From this, it could be seen that this person was obsessed with revenge. Although his strength was not as good as his, he was an opponent that could be taken seriously. Zhongshou, expended my life essence on that realm viewing instrument. Who knows what kind of encounters this person had? He waved his sleeves and kept the silver ant stars and little gold into his sleeves. Zhongshou's eyes flashed with a hint of seriousness. This time, although this person had the intention to kill, his goal was only to test the waters. He wanted to test the level of Zhongshou's swordsmanship. The next time he made a move, it would definitely not be so simple. It was time for him to learn a way to restrain it. Actually, he had one himself, so he didn't need to search for one. Either he returned to the Liu family and grasped all the abilities of his world-burning blood, that couldn't be passed down through the bloodline. This would allow the Blood Eye ability to evolve once more. Or he could evolve his 3,000 star falling to the 3 cycle level and at least build the 3 enclosure framework. However, no matter what, it would take a lot of time. It would take hundreds of thousands of years to cultivate. There was another way, which was to set up the 10 extreme Imperial Tao destruction to restrict the Heaven Movement God art. However, just thinking about it, one knew that the chances of baiting Gong Yuan into the formation were really low. Zhongshou felt a headache, and then he thought about Xingxia. More accurately, it was Xingxia's demon pellet. In this battle, he killed 3 end realms, and only Xingxia left something behind. Zhongshou knew his place and didn't take anything from him. However, Xiuguan and Wei Su both left him the most precious end realm demon pellet. If he used this demon pellet to refine into his 3,000 stars, then, even if Gong Yuan had the ability to reach the heavens, he wouldn't be able to escape from his hands. However, Zhongshou sighed. This end realm demon pellet had Xingxia's spiritual sense remaining. It was the same as the flesh and blood left behind after the 3 end realm experts exploded. It was really problematic and even more problematic. If he didn't want Xingxia's spiritual sense to invade and even have his body stolen, it was best if he stayed far away. Xiuguan also said that he would bring this demon pellet with him to suppress and refine it every day. Only 100 years later would there be a chance of him merging it into his dharma. For the time being, there was no way to restrict the Heaven Movement Mother and Sun sword. Naturally, this person couldn't do anything to him. The only thing he worried about was his family and friends. At this moment, Zhongshou felt really grateful towards the Yin Dragon in his Avicii throne. After I return, I might have to give him some benefits to make him work harder. He placed Gong Yuan's matter aside. Zhong Shaoxin's spiritual sense shone into his soul ocean void. Just now, when he used the unlimited light ability, his senses were even more obvious. His black and white Dharma idol should have made some progress. It wasn't much, but it was obvious. Moreover, he was able to control it more freely than before. Looking closely, moments later, Zhongshou was totally at ease. These 2 good and evil Qilins were using their own strength to improve his black and white Dharma. It was like they were instinctively improving the laws and structures of the black and white holes. However, this wasn't a bad thing. Be it the black hole or white hole, they were more stable and the spiritual energy conversion efficiency was higher. The two of them were also competing. They influenced one another, going head-to-head with one another. Xiaori had the advantage and was pretty much suppressing one another. However, although that Black Qilin was just injured, after all, it fell from the peak of the Saint Realm and was able to hold on. They all say that the Qilin ancestor is like the absolute beginning dragon. They were born together when the region started. They might have even gone through the destruction of a region. Those words are probably true. Zhongshou comprehended something. Xiaoguan tossed this Black Qilin into his soul, not only to purify his King Path energy, but also to help him complete his wish. Taisher became a Dao 10,000 years ago. However, he spent so much effort to find this Black Qilin. It seems like there was a reason for that. In Song Shengdao's book collection, Zhongshou had seen a few books about ancient cultivators that went against the Dao. It wasn't from the cloud world, but spread over from other worlds. It was said that in this region, there were true realm venerables. The absolute beginning dragon, Qilin ancestor, Phoenix ancestor, and even a human race ancestor were all true realm venerables. They had survived from the previous realm before the birth of this realm. That was because they merged with the Tao of the other world and not this world. This was why a few million years ago, after leaving behind descendants, they disappeared without a trace. They might have already fallen, or they might have entered a deep sleep. Chapter 1060. Maybe because they had gone through the true end and beginning, although the black and white Qilins were hundreds of generations away from their ancestors. They were still using their instincts to change the laws of the black and white holes. The two Qilins seemed to be influenced by the beginning and end Dharma. Their bloodlines seemed to be even purer. I can't comprehend it right away. It seems like I need to go into secluded meditation for a period of time. Even as a not-so-professional spirit master, if he didn't understand the changes in the structure of his Dharma and true image, then he was just too weird. There was nothing else to do along the way. In a short 4 hours, Zhongshou finally returned to the peak of Gantian Mountain. Before he even arrived, a dragon roar spread out from the sky above Gantian Mountain City. It was the Yin dragon that charged out from the peak. It moved its silver-white dragon body and looked over. A huge dragon aura pressed down. Zhongshou's lips curled up, thinking to himself, was this a show of strength? He didn't care and continued to travel in the air, not being affected at all. The return to one sword intent protected his body, forming a perfect circle around him, blocking the dragon aura intent 100 feet away. Shock appeared in the eyes of the Yin dragon. It couldn't help but look right at Zhongshou. It was like it was shocked that the person who fed it had actually grown to such a level in such a short time. Zhongshou laughed, casually tossing out a few jade bottles. The Yin dragon's eyes lit up, swallowing all the bottles into its mouth. Then it nodded towards Zhongshou gratefully. Within those bottles were things that Zhongshou had snatched over these few years. They could nourish souls and even remove vengeful spirits. He could see that there was still much vengeful energy in the body of the country protecting God Beast that hadn't been removed. It was the most stubborn part that had been accumulated over 10,000 years. Unless this Yin dragon used his King Path energy to cleanse it for another 3,000 years, only then would it be able to remove all of it. However, if he could use external items, he could speed up this process. The Yin dragon was satisfied and ignored Zhongshou and Chu Shui. It wagged its tail and flew into the sky. Above the clouds, it basked in the sun comfortably. Zhongshou laughed involuntarily. Although this dragon was lazy, with it here, he didn't need to worry about the safety of Gantian Mountain. So the dragon core has been reformed. Speaking of which, the Yin dragon also grasped a portion of the ability to switch between illusionary and real. However, this dragon seemed to have formed another dragon core. It was unknown what kind of great Dao Law it was. It was not surprising that his strength had increased and he had stepped into the Saint Realm. Kong Rue had said long ago that this country protecting God Beast was closely related to the country's strength of Gantian and was buffed by the country luck. As the power of a nation grew stronger, the strength of the divine beast protector would naturally increase as well. If the nation was weak, the rank of the divine beast protector was also at risk of dropping. At this moment, Deqian had 76 great and small worlds. Even in this entire domain, it was considered a considerable force. Within the cloud world, the territory had nearly doubled. Naturally, this dragon stepping into the Saint Realm was a matter of course. Gong Yuan had the Heaven Movement Mother and Sun Sword, but didn't attack Gantia Mountain probably because he was worried about this dragon. Or perhaps he had already suffered under its claws. That was also unknown. This dragon most probably had Saint Realm strength in its last life. This was why it wouldn't be unable to use its own strength after breaking through. Compared to him who used King Path martial arts to barely squeeze into the Saint Realm in the Cloud World, it was much stronger. After sending away this dragon, Zhongshou looked towards the peak of the mountain. He saw that Xianyuan Irin was hugging a 1 to 2 year old baby, smiling as she looked at him. She was still really elegant and valiant, but she had the gentleness of a mother. Samuraim's gaze landed on the body of the kid. In Irin's arms, it waved its little fists, unable to speak clearly, making a lot of noise. It was obvious that it was a really lively fellow who made one worry. His features were clean, looking more like his mother than him. At such a young age, his features were filled with a heroic spirit, not having the fox charm that the sky fox race usually had, which surprised him. At first glance, he had a feeling that they were related by blood. Zhongshou's lips curled up, walking over in large steps, hugging the little fellow and giving it a huge kiss. However, this little fellow was shy. After it tried its best to resist and couldn't, it didn't cry. Instead, it viciously bit his face. Although its teeth weren't fully grown, it was still really strong. Zhongshou instantly laughed out loud, thinking to himself that this was his kid. Then, he felt weird. Why is it so small? He had left the cloud world for 5 years. Why was this little fellow still less than 2 years old? Speaking of which, Xianyuan Irin's eyes were filled with worry. I also don't know. Not long after you left, dinner was like that. Although I am skilled in medicine, I was unable to confirm the cause of the illness. I didn't dare to randomly drug him, so I could only wait for you to return. Zhongshou was startled, grabbing Dan Er's meridians. The last time he returned to the cloud world, he was worried that his kid would be like him, having a dual meridian body, a remnant soul body, which was why he specially checked Dan Er's body. The outcome made him heave a sigh of relief. It was a dual meridian body, but the bloodline had obviously stabilized. His kid had pretty much inherited everything from him, but he didn't have many flaws like he did in the past. A dual meridian body was tough to cultivate. However, with the world-shocking spiritual art that he created, this kid's future achievements wouldn't be weaker than other cultivators. As for the pain of twisting meridians, if Zhongshou could take it, then naturally his kid could too. If not, he wouldn't need to cultivate and would just have a normal life. A thread of true qi reached in, following the 9 chakra meridians and circulating around Dan Er's body. There wasn't any other weird feeling, but there was a bloodline trembling feeling. A moment later, Zhongshou laughed bitterly. It is the world burning bloodline retracing. It should be because he mutated the world burning blood, which caused Dan to stop growing. His mother and Dan benefited the most from the bloodline upgrading to the world burning blood. At this moment, little Dan naturally hadn't mutated the world burning blood However, the bloodline upgrade needed to consume ocean amounts of true qi. The bloodline was being sucked out, causing Dan Er's growth to slow down. Luckily, he returned in time, otherwise, the outcome would be catastrophic. If this continued, sooner or later he would die from true qi. Xianyuan Irin's expression changed when she heard that. No wonder she couldn't diagnose the cause. I need to seal it first. The bloodline upgrade process couldn't be stopped, otherwise, the outcome would be unpredictable. Zhongshou could only slow down the speed at which Dan Er's true qi was being sucked out. However, that was far from enough. The sky-burning Liu family had too many examples of people who were born with the world-burning blood, but couldn't take it and died early. Neither you nor I can keep Dan safe. The only way is to send him to my senior uncle Xiuguan and let him take care of him. Chapter 1061. Within the cloud world, the only person who could help Dan pass this calamity was Xiuguan. Luckily, this kid didn't have the world-burning blood right after he was born. At this moment, he hadn't completed his advancement, and there was still some room for improvement. At this moment, Zhongshou felt an even bigger headache. Luckily, Dan Er's matter wasn't found out by the Liu family and wasn't recorded in the family records. If not, there would be even more problems. Xianyuan Iren's face turned white. Sending Dan away meant that they had to say goodbye. At this moment, although Xiuguan was still within the cloud world. However, this person was like a wild crane. His whereabouts were really hard to track. Once Cang Xingdao's matter was settled, who knows where he would go? However, although she was a loving mother, she wasn't an ignorant girl. Her eyes were filled with sadness, but she said decisively, "Is it Cang Xingdao Xiuguan? With him taking care of Dan, or we'll be fine." "That is good. This matter isn't urgent. Let's talk about it later." Zhongshou smiled. He knew that Xianyuan Iren wasn't willing to send him away. He also wasn't willing to send him away after just seeing his kid a few times. He could not recognize his own father when he grew up. However, sealing the world-burning blood couldn't be dragged on any longer. This kid only has a nickname. When he grows up, let's call him Leping, Zhong Leping. Before he returned, he hoped that even if his descendants couldn't be like him, they wouldn't have the ambition to suppress the world. He also wanted to live his life with vigor and not let down his own prestige. Now that he returned to Gantian Mountain, he only hoped that this kid could have a happy life and be safe. Suddenly, Zhongshou thought about Zhong Weiran. When he was young, his father probably felt the same way. After saying this, Zhongshou looked behind his wife at the large group of people who were also waiting. 12 dragon horses pulling the carriage, a full set of ruler's honor. Including Rimbois, pretty much all the important people of Gantian Mountain were gathered here. Close to 1,000 grade 7 cultivators stood in the air, their expressions solemn and respectful. There were also 80,000 cavalry who rode on cloud horses and stood in the air. At this moment, the might of an emperor was fully displayed. Zhongshou found these people troublesome. When he returned to Gantian, he had many things to say to Iren. He had been hungry and thirsty for a long time, wishing he could immediately sleep with her for a few days. How could he be in a mood to deal with these annoying fellows? However, before he opened his mouth and chased these people away, Rimbois bowed and said, "Ruler's return is a joyous matter for Artichian. I invite Monarch to patrol the city to reassure the people." Similarly, Hu Qinxiu, Zhonggang, Qiu Wei, and the other elders all bowed solemnly. The greetings of a ruler can't be ignored. Jun Shang, please patrol the city. Zhongshou stared blankly for a moment. Then he carefully looked at the few people who remained silent. Thinking about it seriously, he held Xianyuan Iren's hand and stepped onto the carriage. At the same time, he spread out his divine sense and scanned the entire city. In that instant, countless voices were transmitted into his mind at the same time. Enemies of the Confucian sect? Could it be that Jun Shang is really an incapable ruler? What nonsense are you saying? What kind of life did we have in the past? We didn't have enough food to fill our stomachs. What about now? As long as we work hard, we can live a luxurious life. If such a ruler is an incapable ruler, then what are those city lords and country lords in the past? Trash? I heard that yesterday, the 3 factions attacked Cang Xingdao, but because of ruler, they were forced to retreat. That sage Zhu of the Confucian faction flew into a rage out of embarrassment. Legend has it that our ruler is Cang Xingdao's disciple. That Zhu Zi said that ruler believes in the evil path and doesn't follow the laws, not following the words of saints, not following the path of heaven and earth. In my eyes, there is nothing wrong with everyone being equal. Wouldn't that be a mess? Do you want ruler and those nobles to be equal to us commoners? Ruler removed the private troops and removed special privileges. Under the country laws, nobles and commoners are the same. That is equality. Those nobles have contributed greatly to the country, so it is natural for them to enjoy more. That Taishang followed the words of saints, but what about now? War is everywhere, and the people have no way to live. On the other hand, our Qian is not only able to protect a piece of land, but our country is also prosperous and the people are safe. However, that Juzi also said that after all, this is an evil path and can't last for long. What did those people say? I feel that those nobles are quite happy. They all feel that the Confucian sect is a busybody. Hey, if it was me, I wouldn't follow the teachings of the Confucian sect. I would return the power of governance to the ruler and let him kill me. How would I be as free as now? In the end, it is still an evil path. I heard that today, all the colleges in Qian have pretty much closed. Those people are all knowledgeable and won't be wrong. Zhongshu frowned. At this moment, within Gantian Mountain City, there was only one word that could describe it, which was panic. No wonder Rinbua, who hated waste and extravagance, would send out such a huge group to let him patrol the city. Originally, he thought that Qian was ruled by barbarians and wouldn't be affected too much. Only now did he know that the influence of the Confucian sect was much stronger than he had imagined. Luckily, during these 10 years of governance, after all, he had won over the hearts of the Qian people. At this moment, within Gantian Mountain City, most of the people were on his side and didn't believe Zhu Zi's words. College? Who knows whether or not Linhai College was among them? Before he unified Donglin, these scholars pretty much controlled the public opinion of the entire Donglin cloud continent. The closing of the college would have an impact on the Qian people who were hard to predict. However, should he say that these people were asking to die? Zhongshu gave a cruel smile and then frowned. At this moment, if he attacked these scholars, he would only be taking advantage of Zhu Zi's intentions. It seemed like the more the situation dragged on, the worse it would be for him. Using the south to drag down the Taishang was like a dream, unrealistic. The Qian's foundations were still deeply rooted. However, if this storm was allowed to expand, it would affect the entire Qian people. There was even a chance that his 10 years of ruling and his intention to influence the people of Great Gan would be destroyed in an instant. The only thing he could do now was to end this quickly. As long as he knocked down the Taishang and the Confucian sect, then the uproar in the country would naturally calm down. Endless cold intent gathered in his eyes, slowly gathering, killing intent. However, at this moment, a few discussions flashed across his soul ocean. Although we haven't studied, we can still differentiate between good and bad. Without Monarch, how could we, as martial artists, have such riches and honor? That's right. Apart from being lustful, the ruler doesn't have any other problems. Lustful? How's he lustful? The ruler only has Queen Xianyuan and concubine Kong. Speaking of which, could it be that something happened to Jun Shang? He is surrounded by beauties, but only has one queen and one concubine. Where would there be a ruler like him? Who knows? Luckily, he already has a prince. Zhongshu felt his chest tighten, nearly spitting out a mouthful of fresh blood. Chapter 1062. A full 80,000 cavalry lined up in an orderly formation, protecting the carriage pulled by 12 dragon horses as they entered the wide streets. Then the entire Gantian Mountain City started to get noisy. Numerous flower petals scattered down from the sides of the streets. Pretty much everyone was in a celebratory mood. The discussions that spread throughout the giant city were instantly reduced by a large amount. What replaced it was endless cheers. Is it really the ruler? The ruler is finally back. These few years the ruler wasn't here. I always felt uneasy. With the ruler back, our Qian will sweep the 6 directions and unify the cloud world. Unify your head. Only with the ruler back will those people be well behaved. A weird light shone in Samuraim's eyes. He felt a little guilty. In the past 10 years, he had done very little for his people. However, at this moment, outside of the carriage, the respect that the Qian people had for him came from the bottom of their hearts. However, speaking of which, If he personally interfered in too many matters, he might not be as prosperous as today's Deqian. Then, thinking back to just now, Zhongsho gritted his teeth, smashing the armrest beside him into pieces. How preposterous! Xinyuan Irin was at the side, using her hand to cover her mouth, suppressing her laughter. When Zhongsho used his spiritual sense to communicate, he didn't hide anything from her, which was why she was able to find out. At that time, Xinyuan Irin laughed until she nearly cramped. Her image as the mother of the country was totally gone. Then, she heard Zhongsho laugh, looking over with a dark and sinister gaze. Xinyuan Irin was furious, thinking back to Ruoshui and Kong Yao who weren't in Gantian Mountain. If this fellow caught her and messed around, she wouldn't be able to handle it alone. The ability of the Sky Fox could make one want to die. She couldn't stop even if she wanted to. Instead, she would crave until she was exhausted and couldn't continue. Her expression turned solemn as she said apologetically, "I remember that after I return, I still have a furnace of pills to refine. Only after a few days will I be able to accompany my husband." She then glanced at Chushua, a trace of a smile flashing in her eyes. "Husband, if you feel lonely and uncomfortable, why don't you take Schwerer as your concubine? It can also be stuffed into the mouths of my Deqian people." "Ah!" Chushua exclaimed. She had been shot while lying down. Chi-Chun also knew what Xinyuan Yi meant by the word receive. She hurriedly shook her head like a rattle drum, her face flushing red. Zhongsho snorted coldly and did not comment. However, in his heart, he had already made up his mind. When he returned to the palace this time, he had to properly discipline this lass and display his might as a husband. The excuse of alchemy was useless to him this time. At this moment, Zhongsho suddenly sensed something and looked outside the translucent curtain with a solemn expression. Dozens of people dressed in Confucian attire suddenly blocked in front of the formation, blocking the middle of the street. Around them were hundreds and thousands of rotten vegetable leaves and bamboo scrolls, which were all thrown over. "Zhongsho, you tyrant Confucian enemy. You will die a horrible death. Evil demon, monster race ruler. How can you be the ruler of a country? Didn't you say you wanted to burn down Confucians? If you have the ability, then kill us. Kill you, you unruly ruler. The central Taishang dynasty is about to attack. Let's see how long you can be happy for. Gantian Mountain will definitely be wiped out. This person is an evil demon. Everyone in the world can kill him, and everyone can replace him. Zhong Weiran can be considered a wise ruler. If he had a son like you, he would definitely be filled with hatred." They scolded out, pretty much not choosing their words. However, it was suppressed by the cheers from nearby. Those vegetable leaves and bamboo scrolls were less than 1,000 feet away from the carriage. They were slashed into pieces by the close guards protecting nearby. The dozens of Confucian scholars in front were forcefully captured and pulled away from the imperial path. It was just a small storm, but it calmed down in an instant. Zhongsho sat quietly on the throne in the carriage, not saying a word. The killing intent in his eyes was even colder and more pressing. This time he was truly enraged. A flame of ignorance silently roasted his chest. "All the people who participated will be locked up in the Ministry of Justice. Don't use torture and don't make things hard for them. A month later, we will deal with them." Originally, he wanted to kill these people right now. However, he knew that if he was stubborn now, it would make those Confucian scholars even happier and more confident. At that time, Zhongsho would be known as a tyrant. As for these Confucian scholars who blocked the path and scolded him, they would be treated as heroes. Zhongsho wasn't a magnanimous person. However, even if he wanted these people to die, he had to kill them after their reputation was destroyed. Die a horrible death? Monster race ruler? One had to admit that these people really infuriated him. Zhonggang, as one of the 5 army inspectors, was in charge of all the close guards apart from the Blood Cloud Cavalry and the Black Fox Iron Cavalry. At this moment, he accompanied by the side of the carriage, riding his horse. When he heard that, he was startled and a little surprised. Then, he angrily rode his horse away to pass on Zhongsho's orders. When Rimbaud heard that, he gave out a consoling smile. The ruler had grown up. He wasn't happy with material gains and wasn't sad for himself. He was really shrewd. He was still calm and didn't let rage get to his head, making the smartest decision. They circled around the entire Gantian mountain, cruising a full round. A full 8 hours later, the carriage entered Gantian mountain under the protection of the 20,000 Blood Cloud cavalry. Returning to Hanyan Palace, Zhongsho suppressed the desire that had been building up for a long time. He summoned all the officials to the political meeting hall. However, the first topic of discussion wasn't about any country matters. Instead, he conferred Zhong Ruoshui as a concubine to inform the Deqian people, who said that Zhongsho only had one queen and one concubine these few years. The officials didn't have any objections to this matter. Instead, they were happy to see it happen. Zhong Weiron's bloodline, since 5 generations ago, was passed down to only one person. If any accidents happened, it would be tough to find a suitable successor. After all, 5 generations of relatives were too far away. Now that the ruler was enlightened and was willing to start a family, that was great. However, conferring the title of concubine was a joyous matter. So why did the ruler look so bitter and vengeful? However, it seemed like Zhongsho wasn't affected too much by the matter of people blocking Lu Man and scolding him. This caused the people in the hall to heave a sigh of relief. The second matter they discussed was that Zhongsho was prepared to send out a decree to not allow the Deqian people to talk about the ruler. Rinbo was slightly surprised, thinking to himself that his ruler was angered by those Confucians. However, he didn't need to think too deeply about this matter to know that he would definitely oppose it. We can't do that. The ancients have said that preventing people from talking is more important than preventing rivers. We can only spread rumors. We can't block them. The few generals at the side didn't care about it all. However, a few civil servants objected at the same time. That Su Shu was the right council member of the meeting hall, which was the deputy head of the council. He also bowed and persuaded. Ruler also said that our Deqian people can't be offended by words. How can we go back on our words now? If ruler is angry at those Confucians, you don't need to do that. Our Deqian people have their own laws to punish them. Disturbing your majesty, trying to assassinate you, insulting the ruler, they deserve to be cut into pieces. Zhongsho was speechless. He couldn't tell these people. What he was really annoyed about was that they were discussing the number of concubines Zhongsho had and whether or not they were useless. Seeing that these few civil servants were so firm, he felt like he was in the wrong. After arguing for a while, Zhongsho could only helplessly give up. Following, which was the third matter of the Confucian, Saint Zhu Zi, treating Zhongsho as the enemy of the Confucians. Zhu Zi is really vicious, using a heaven-reaching method to announce to the world that he wants to cause internal strife in our Deqian. He wants our Deqian vassals to have ambitions and want to replace our Deqian. At that time, although the Deqian unified Donglin, there were still some traces left behind. However, there were still many loose ends left behind. Many city lords still maintained their autonomy and were just vassals. Luckily, during these few years, many cities and towns took the initiative to become Deqian cities. As for the private soldiers under the control of the various city lords, Qiuwei had cut their flesh with a soft knife and reduced their numbers by more than half. At this moment, even if they wanted to rebel, they couldn't do anything. Expanding the army and preparing for war needed a period of time. We don't need to bother about those city lords in Donglin. The ones that are worrying are the demon sect and the other sections. Those demon sect disciples will definitely cause trouble all around. In this half a day, just around Gantian Mountain, there were 4 cases of people from the demon sect using evil techniques. The casualties reached 100. If we can't stop them, if this goes on, people will panic. Hu Qinqiu was really worried. His tiger race bloodline had lost more than 20 disciples because of this demon sect. Although they weren't from the Iron Tiger bloodline, the monster race population was precious and made one's heart hurt. These tiger race disciples didn't die on the battlefield, but instead died in the schemes of the demon sect. Zhongsho's brows furrowed. He knew that the chaos caused by the demon sect wasn't something that the few subordinate sects of Deqian and some factionless cultivators could suppress. I will inform the Song Xingdao Kinzo sect about this matter and ask them to help. He didn't hesitate at all. This was one of the conditions for them to open up the outer region and allow the Song Xingdao Kinzo sect to build a dojo in Deqian. After this, he didn't need to feel like he owed them anything. It was time for them to help out. With that, Donglin and Huizhou should be stable. Only South Wind Cloud Continent has just calmed down. After this storm, there will be chaos. We need to send troops to suppress it. This time the one who spoke was the Privy Court head Xiuwei. He was still really calm and had the aura of a general. We need at least 300,000 Grade 3 elite troops to ensure the stability of South Wind Cloud Continent. However, such a small number can at most last for 3 months. Zhongshuo's expression was really solemn. 300,000 Grade 3 elite troops was already a huge force. In the current cloud world, it wasn't much. However, before the spiritual wave, it was enough to sweep an entire cloud continent. Apart from that, one of the crucial parts of this battle is the Navy. Is Ruler able to transfer some spaceships back? Gulaikon alone won't be able to hold on. Deqian's foundations in the central cloud continent were really shallow. All resources needed to be transported from Huizhou via cloud ships. It seemed problematic, but it was actually much more convenient than Taishan. Within Deqian, the roads were connected in all directions and the carriage could travel thousands of miles in a day. The cloud ships were even faster. However, the foundations of all this were built on the Navy. Chapter 1063. Deqian's land consisted of 3 cloud continents and cloud islands that were tens of thousands of miles apart, which was why their ocean transportation was developed. Once the Navy was crushed, then Deqian's billions of troops and resources would be useless. The few million troops of Deqian will be trapped in the south. However, since Zhongshuo was prepared to bleed Deqian dry in the south of the central continent, naturally he had something to rely on. Deqian's cloud ship division had the ability to go up against the Taishan. The problem was that the Taishan had tens of years of accumulation and they had 29 toothed giant ships. Although they were cloud ships, they could go up against some low-end Earth-grade warships. There is no need to worry about this matter. I have already sent orders for Shur Ruolin to lead 9 Tai God Lightning ships and 6 9 Bright Broken Star ships to rush over. As for the other space ships, there are 40. Originally, he didn't dare to do that. He moved a large portion of the squadron defending the celestial world away. However, roughly 10 days ago, the Shura race handed over the 10 Tai God Lightning ships in advance. The former Judu Xianting Navy Governor Ilingsu also decided to become an official for some reason. He even persuaded many Judu Xianting soldiers who controlled the warships all year round. This caused the pressure on the Deqian Celestial Dynasty to be greatly reduced, and they could finally take out a portion of their strength to send back to the cloud world. 15 close to top Earth-grade warships, along with an unparalleled general, were more than enough to suppress the Taishan. The people in the hall were all pumped up and their expressions relaxed. The biggest problem was solved. Then even if Deqian lost, they would be able to protect their foundations. They just needed to lock down the cloud ocean such that the Taishan couldn't disembark in the 3 places. Then, even if they had billions of troops, they wouldn't be able to do anything. Xiuwei wasn't so optimistic. How could the 3 factions be underestimated? Before the common people's path vast habitat battle, the 3 factions were the top 3 in the cloud world. The depth of his accumulation was unimaginable. Even now, Song Xingdao and the Kinzo sect could not compare to him. Even if Shur Ruolin returned, the strength of the 2 sides would at most be tied. In that case, Courtyard Envoy Qiu is certain that the Taishan will attack Ardeqian in the near future. It's obvious. It's just a matter of time. Xiuwei answered without hesitation. Half a day ago, the Military Intelligence Division of the Privy Council received news from the imperial capital. He said that Emperor Yuanshan had already sent a decree to gather the troops of the various vassals. He was prepared to follow the saint's decree and personally lead the troops in the name of seeking justice. Therefore, this subject is extremely fortunate that Monarch was able to return in time. Rinbo frowned. He had expected the Taishang's attack. However, he hadn't heard of this news yet. In that case, how many soldiers do you think there will be? And when will they invade the Qian territory? About 2 months. If the Confucians and Taoists rush it, it might be faster. Qiuwei took in a deep breath and was still confident. The Taishang has 53 continents, a total of 370 provinces. Each province has a governor-manor to raise troops. Depending on the taxes, it ranges from 100,000 to 300,000. Logically speaking, this should all be grade 3 soldiers. However, the Taishang has been around for 1,800 years, and their foundations have long rotted. The matter of them eating empty positions is seen as a normal occurrence. Moreover, the troops of the mainland have been peaceful for a long time, and their combat strength is really weak. Everyone's chests sank. At this moment, they truly understood how huge the Taishang was. Even if those Taishang generals ate empty positions and took away 30% of their military strength, they still had at least 30 million troops. Compared to the Qian, they were 10 times weaker. No matter how weak their combat strength was, just this number was already shocking. The south and the mid-plains are separated by a Honglian mountain range. This mountain range stretches for thousands of miles, and the terrain is really craggy. It is tough for the army to spread out and pass through. Unless one uses enough space treasures, it would be tough to provide for 1 million troops. This was also the reason why the Taishang was unable to take down the south for thousands of years. Zhongshu laughed bitterly. The Taoist, Confucian, and demon factions might really be able to take out enough space treasures to provide for tens of millions of people. Luckily, there were signs of chaos within the Taishang. They also needed to defend against the barbarians in the north and west. With Zhongshu's estimations, the Taishang's limit should be 10 to 15 million, all of them grade 3 soldiers. However, the key to this battle is still the Dao soldiers. The Taishang's 300,000 Dao soldiers were all wiped out in the common people's path vast habitat. Only 40,000 Imperial Guards had reached the 4th level. However, with the Confucian and Taoist factions suppressing, those aristocratic families and vassal towns will definitely join in. 20-odd families working together have 200,000 Huang Grey Dao soldiers and 50,000 Xian Grey Dao soldiers. However, although there are many of them, they're just a bunch of random people. If the battle goes well, we can win. If the situation isn't good, then the various families will prioritize preserving their strength. Zhongshu nodded slightly. This was also the reason why he didn't fear the 6 times difference in numbers. As long as they focused on one side, they would be able to easily crush the 200,000 Dao soldiers who seem to have the advantage in numbers. The most terrifying ones are the Taoist, demon, and Confucian factions. The Taoist faction's 50,000 purple Qilin flame spear cavalry didn't suffer many losses in the common people's path vast habitat battle. The Sky Demon vast habitat also kept roughly 18,000 Sky Demon war cavalry. Before this, they didn't go all out. The Xian Grey Dao soldiers they mobilized should be around 30,000. As for the other sects, it is hard to predict. Although they are heavily injured, their foundations are still really thick. The day before yesterday, I only had 3 million grade 3 soldiers that I could use in the south. There are also 40,000 Big Dipper sword soldiers, 20,000 Big Dipper crossbow soldiers, close to 30,000 Blood Cloud cavalry. Everyone was silent. Be it Dao soldiers or war soldiers, it was a 6 times difference. The situation was so bad that even an ancient famous general would find it tough to win, right? Zhongshu looked on from the throne and couldn't help but shake his head. The huge strength of the Taishang actually caused the morale of the officials under him to drop to such a low level. However, it wasn't surprising. If it was him, if he didn't have an important trump card, he wouldn't be so relaxed either. He knew that the human heart couldn't be underestimated. Zhong Shou smiled. Before returning from the common people's vast habitat, Song Xingdao, revered One Wei, Su, and Kinzo Sec Sword Spirit Palace head Lingchen personally promised me that they would send all their Dao soldiers under me. Qiu Wei's eyes lit up and was filled with joy. With that, our Qian might have a chance of winning. It was expected that the common people's vast habitat would stand on the side of the Qian. For the Kinzo sect to place such a huge bet so early was a surprise. Be it Song Shengdao's common people's mysterious dragon warriors or the Kinzo sect's Moyang sword cavalry. They were all really famous in the cloud world and were even famous in the outer region. They were top Xin Grey Dao soldiers. In the south region, there were mountains and swamps. If they planned it well, they could cause the Taishang to have a huge army but be unable to spread it out. It would cause an elite versus elite situation where one battle could decide everything. He trusted Zhang Huai's intellect and Kong Yao's ability to control the situation. However, everyone's eyes looked towards Kong Rui, who was at the end of the line. It was obvious that they felt that Qiu Wei's words weren't as useful as his. Even Rin Bo and Qiu Wei themselves were filled with anticipation. The imperial astronomer of the Great Qian dynasty was a very capable person. Kong Rui broke out into a laugh and shook his head. The weather has been messed up, and temporarily, I can't predict good or bad. Even if I can't say such a huge thing, and I don't dare to say it. I don't dare to take the blame for revealing the secrets of the heavens. Even with the one king divination money in his hands, he didn't dare to look at Zhong Shou's fate and destiny. He raised his head and looked at the void outside of the hall. He could see a giant red cloud that was accumulating strength and waiting to strike. The cloud energy within rumbled, and one could see the shapes of dragons and phoenixes. The situation was already set, and no one could change it. Even the heavens stood on the side of Zhong Shou. The Saint King of the world was naturally protected by the heavens. Thinking back to those colleges and those arrogant Confucians who blocked the carriage today, Kong Rui sneered. Kong Rui smiled coldly. Unfortunately, he could not make another bet with Zhong Xuan. However, although I can't predict the luck of this battle, I am sure that our Qian will be fine. Everyone's expressions relaxed again, as if they had eaten a tranquilizer, and they even revealed expressions of joy. Zhong Shou was slightly unhappy. Why did he feel that his prestige as the ruler of a country wasn't as high as Kong Rui's? However, there was nothing he could do. Who asked this imperial astronomer to be his father-in-law? Since Qiu and imperial astronomer Kong have said that, then I am at ease. Rinbo bowed, his expression solemn. The 6 departments of the cabinet will go all out for this battle. The Gantian Mountain Army won't have to worry about food and clothing. Ruler, please acknowledge Concubine Kong as the commander. Qiu Wei also bowed at this moment. Please send an order to recruit all grade 3 and above martial cultivators and spirit masters. They hadn't been trained and hadn't practiced formations. They wouldn't be of use in a short period of time. However, it was more than enough to suppress the country. As the head of the Privy Court, Qiu Wei was really clear about how huge the potential of Gantian Mountain was. The prosperity of the martial path and spiritual cultivation could be said to be at the top of the entire cloud continent. Many normal people were helped by the Qian to climb up from the bottom of martial cultivators and spirit masters. There were also many people who slowly showed outstanding cultivation talents. These people were mostly grateful to the Qian. They might not be able to fight to the death, but most of them would be loyal to Zhong Shou. Zhong Shou's lips curled up as he waved his sleeves. Naturally, there would be a censor to help him write memorials. It was completed in an instant and was about to stamp it. Outside of Gantian Mountain, there was a loud explosion. At the same time, the furious roar of the Yin dragon spread out. Zhong Shou's brows rose up as he looked out. He saw a few corpses being tossed in. Zhong Shou, in these 2 months, I will make sure that you won't be able to eat and sleep well. In 2 months, it will be the death anniversary of Zhong Shou, the day that the Qian is wiped out. After he said that, the voice shook the heavens, and slowly the aura disappeared. This person is the Blood Saint Demon Lord. Kong Rue seemed to recognize this voice, his pupils constricting. Rimba's eyes were filled with heartache as he looked at the corpses on the ground. It is the Xian city prefect and the Yin city garrison. He didn't recognize the other few people. However, from their clothes, he could tell that they were all officials of Deqian. When the officials in the hall heard that, their faces turned ashen white. Their expressions were filled with hatred, but there was nothing they could do. Zhongshu's face turned green. Saint Realm experts. At this moment, Deqian was in a precarious situation. Chapter 1064. In just a month, the Deqian bureaucratic system was on the verge of collapsing. Even in the Senate Hall, there were many senators who either refused to come out due to illness or simply resigned. Not only because of the demon sect attacking everywhere, but also because the Taishang had gathered 17 million troops near the Honglian mountain range. A full 400,000 Xian and Huang Grey Dao soldiers had reached the border. Apart from that, there were 29-toothed giant ships and hundreds of 7-toothed warships that were gathered in the Cloud Ocean near the south. It vaguely formed the pressure of Mount Tai. Once everything was complete, it would sweep through the south. At this moment, the Deqian people still had faith in Zhongshu. Especially those generals, their confidence was close to blind. After Zhongshu took over, his actions were preposterous. However, he won every battle and won every one of them. He won many times with fewer people, establishing the foundations of the Deqian. This was why even if they knew that during this month, Zhongshu was doing whatever he wanted in the palace and spending his days leisurely, they still didn't waver. However, there was a portion who didn't have high hopes for the current Deqian. The Deqian has problems both internally and externally, but the ruler is in the depths of the palace. What kind of nonsense is that? In the past, the Qin emperor burned books and buried Confucians, and in the end, an entire generation died. This Deqian probably isn't much better. Although the ruler is talented, he is too young. He is too confident and too reckless. What a waste. The Taishang came all over, and we can't fight them head-on. Their military strength is 6 times that of our Deqian. Actually, if we take a step back and retreat to Huizhou and South Wind Cloud Continent, maybe our Deqian might have a chance of survival. In the months since he returned, he didn't touch a single administrative matter and didn't summon a single official. What is the difference between him and those rulers in history who didn't have morning court sessions and neglected administrative matters? Although Gantian Mountain is more prosperous than the imperial capital, I think that Deqian is not far from defeat. Like a flash in the pan, only a moment of youth, sigh. Although Zhongshu was in the Hanyan Palace, news wasn't blocked. There were hidden guards who copied the words of those resigning officials over. However, he didn't take it to heart, as what they said was the truth. Zhongshu did hate politics and wasn't willing to spend too much effort on administrative matters. Actually, just resigning to avoid trouble was considered light. There were many nobles in Gantian Mountain City who were flirting with Great Shang and the Confucians. There were also many who joined them in the dark. At this moment, Zhongshu Deqian was of the Deqian's Deqian army. However, although the resignation of a large number of officials and counselors made it extremely difficult for Rinbo and the others, it was not without benefits. Of Qian, the Qian of Qian, Qian. Of Zong to the Qian, Zita Qian was of them. The first political matter was to gather the scholars and revise the national law. Rinbo naturally didn't have any objections. The current Deqian laws were inherited from the desolate era and weren't suitable for the times. However, what Zhongshu wanted was to lighten the punishment, removing all the punishment of chopping off limbs from the country law and turning it into a labor punishment. He also wanted to reform the 3 law divisions and merge them into one. They would be totally independent of the 6 ministries and would only be supervised by the meeting hall and the censorate. Out of the 6 ministries, removing the punishment department and setting up a business department. However, if the punishment is too light, how can it make the people follow the law? Why is there a need for the three law divisions to be independent? Rimbaud was not the only one who was puzzled. The cabinet and the other ministers were also puzzled. Physical punishment is cruel, breaking limbs. Normal people won't be able to revive and will also lose manpower. I think that punishment isn't about punishing, but to make people regret and turn over a new leaf, to persuade people to do good. To make people follow the law, it isn't about the severity of the punishment, but it is about fairness and fairness. The laws must be followed, and no favoritism is allowed. In the past, the Qian had strict laws. However, there were many cases of people bending the law. It was still okay when Gantian Mountain was under his feet. However, in the other cities, there were nobles who did whatever they wanted and escaped punishment, treating the laws as nothing. If that was the case, how could the people of the Qian be convinced? Zhongshu was totally disappointed with the original three law divisions. This time, they were independent and would only be supervised by him, the meeting hall, and the censorate. In the future, when they decided cases, they wouldn't be influenced by the ministers and nobles. They have to follow the laws? Rimbaud muttered to himself and then smiled bitterly. Even if he felt that he was honest, he wasn't totally flawless. The Confucian faction of the cloud world always felt that human relationships were more important than the laws of the country. This was why there were people who felt that it was the teachings of the saints. However, if the laws weren't followed and everyone was biased, no matter how strong the country was, it would weaken and its foundations would slowly rot. As expected, the ruler hated the Confucian faction. At this moment, the remaining officials in Deqian were either loyal to Zhongshu and were dead set on following him. Either they were honest and righteous, not afraid of the death threats of the demon sect, or they had high hopes for Deqian and were interested. Although Rimbaud wanted to stop Zhongshu, he couldn't do anything about it. The second policy was to subsidize the farmers. Rimbaud didn't have any opinions on this matter. Martial cultivators and spirit masters could easily obtain ocean amounts of wealth. On the contrary, there were fewer and fewer farmers. Using money to subsidize, to allow farmers to maintain their livelihood was a good policy, a policy that focused on agriculture. However, the third policy made Rimbaud's heart jump, sending a chill down his spine. Zhongshu wanted to set a minimum salary for all workers in Deqian and limit their working hours. He also wanted to take out a large amount of money from their income. He ordered the cabinet to set a retirement policy like those of the military. This policy was to open the eyes of all Deqian people, to allow those workers to have food and clothing. However, Rimbaud knew that if this policy was pushed out, who knows how many nobles in Deqian would hate him to the bone. As for the portion that was allocated, it wasn't much to set up a retirement policy for these workers. If Zhongshu wasn't willing to invest this money into the military, there was nothing he could do about it. However, he still had to persuade him about this policy. The salary of the workers should be decided by the employer. If the salary was high, the employees would naturally follow the wind and be happy to join. If the salary was low, there would definitely be no one who would show any interest. Why do we need the imperial court to force it? Moreover, this isn't the right time. Zhongshu shook his head and didn't summon Rimbaud. He only sent out an unofficial secret decree for his trusted men to spread it out. I heard that the path of the economy is in consumption. At this moment in Deqian, there are many workers and few workstations. The employers are fighting to lower their salaries. If this goes on, sooner or later, our Deqian people won't have enough to eat. If the people don't have money, even if they create thousands of items, who would spend money to buy them? Limiting working hours means increasing workstations. As the Prime Minister, you should be clear about the path of the economy and not be controlled by those rich merchants. On the surface, Gantian Mountain looked prosperous, but Zhongshu knew that in the dark, there were many people who didn't have enough to eat. In a day, they would be busy for 20 hours. Every day, they were as busy as dogs. Actually, he was too lazy to bother about the life and death of these people. However, These people had worked hard for so long and snatched the chance of others to do the hard work, which wasn't appropriate. As for timing, this policy will be implemented. It will be after the battle with the Taishang ends. Prime Minister, don't worry. If you aren't willing, you can resign and let Zhang Huai take over. Knowing that he was prepared to implement it after the war, Rinbo heaved a sigh of relief. If he really wanted to announce this policy at this time, before the war with the Taishang started, the Qin would be in chaos. As for the last sentence, Rinbo laughed involuntarily. Was the ruler trying to provoke him? Speaking of which, his second term was indeed coming to an end. Taishang forbade the prime minister from serving 2 terms, but after 10 years, he could take up the position once more. However, if the ruler really wanted to implement this policy, he wasn't afraid. Although this policy would offend those merchants, the true nobles didn't care about that little bit of salary. Once it was implemented, he could accumulate huge prestige among the people. 10 years later, he could still easily take over as prime minister. However, what kind of consumption, what kind of economic path was this? Limiting working hours, setting a minimum wage, was it beneficial for the country? Rinbo wasn't willing to believe it so easily. He needed to investigate carefully and weigh the pros and cons before making a decision. If it was harmful to the country, then if he offended Zhong Shou once more, he would go all out to stop him. The 4th policy was to clear out the land, and all the officials and gentry would pay for grain, banning all land transactions, and only the Daqian imperial court could buy it and then loan it to the landless people. This was another government decree that had offended all the powerful and influential officials. There were numerous hidden lands in the world, and most of those nobles and officials didn't need to pay taxes. Zhong Shou's policy took away many benefits from these people. Luckily, only a few people knew about these 2 policies, and they were all Zhong Shou's trusted aides. If not, once it spread out, it would cause a huge uproar. Zhong Shou seemed to be planning to implement this policy after the Taishang War. This made Rinbo nervous and shocked. Looking at the ruler's intentions, he was prepared to clear out the nobles in the country after defeating the Taishang. Prime Minister, don't worry. From what I see, the implementation of this policy is easier than I thought. Now that the spiritual wave is rising, it is time for martial artists to prosper. As long as 1 grade 4 Mind Stone Beast Crystal, one would be able to keep warm without any worries. Our Daqian policy will also make doing business much better than farming. I won't hide it from you. My family was originally planning to sell some land. Shushu was the right council member, so naturally, he was one of the things Zhong Shou relied on to push out these few policies, and he also knew the inside story. This is good governance. If all the officials and gentry can pay taxes together, then it will be good governance. Paying taxes is a good thing for our country. Since we pay grain, then we should have subsidies. Actually, we didn't lose out much. Rinbo was startled, and then he smiled bitterly. Naturally, it is a good thing. Even if there is some resistance, I will try my best. However, I can't understand the ruler. Juanshang is indeed not good at administrative matters. But looking at Juanshang's methods, it's clear that he's rebuilding a house. Changing the pillars, rebuilding the political system. Shushu smiled, his eyes shining brightly. I don't know what other people think, but in my eyes, the ruler is undoubtedly the ruler. Compared to that Taishang Inu, he is thousands of times better. Chapter 1065. I don't know what other people think, but in my eyes, ruler is undoubtedly a saint ruler. Compared to that Taishang Inu, you are thousands of times stronger. Saint ruler? Rinbo was slightly distracted and was stunned. Avoiding physical punishment, loving the people, even going so far as to take action against the nobles. His Highness was indeed the Holy Lord. Then Rinbo laughed involuntarily. Great Shang Yuanshan Emperor is recognized as a wise ruler that is hard to come by in 1,000 years. When he was young, he was already holding on to a huge building. Every day, he was diligent and didn't get tired. Ruler is also a rare wise ruler. but to say that he is thousands of times stronger than Emperor Yuanshan is impossible. Su Shu, you really dare to say that? Su Shu didn't argue, scoffing coldly. However, in his heart, he didn't think much of it. So what if Yin Yu is diligent and diligent? So what if he eats and sleeps all night? At this moment, wasn't the Taishang in chaos and war? The Taishang had suffered for a long time. Being diligent might not mean that he was a good ruler, although his ruler was lazy and pretty much didn't interfere in politics. However, he wasn't careless about the governance of the country. At this moment, the Qin was slowly entering its peak. Yin Yu used power to rule people and wanted to do everything personally. Zhongshou used the system to select talents and give them power without any worries. They were both rulers, but between the two, the difference was obvious. Those Confucian scholars must have been blind to recognize that Yin Yu was a wise ruler of the current era, while his own ruler was a preposterous and immoral person. He felt a sense of righteous indignation and wanted to step out to fight with the Confucians. However, he knew that it was useless. Those saints were all focused on the teachings of the saints and couldn't listen to anything else. Arguing with these Confucians was just asking to be humiliated. Whether it was right or wrong would be revealed thousands of years later. Skipping this part, Shushu narrowed his eyes and changed the topic. Looks like the ruler is really confident this time. He most probably has the confidence to win. I wonder how many people will suffer after this battle? Speaking of the battle this time, Rinbo stroked his long beard with a strange expression on his face. The policy of distributing grain as a whole, the policy of equalizing farmland, and the policy of setting a minimum wage were all very ambitious. This was not something a monarch who had no confidence in the future could come up with. Not necessarily. Jun Shang wants to create a fair world and give the world just laws. Even if a purge was to be carried out, it would most likely be done according to the law. In short, you and I can only wait and see. At this time, Zhongshou did not know that his ministers were discussing in private. He still brought Dan, Irin, and Chushua with him. Every day, he would admire the flowers and moon, fish, and play with birds. Apart from playing, he would spare some time to care about those few important matters. After convincing Rinbo, Hu Qianxiu, and a few other trusted old officials, he was completely calm and unruffled in the midst of chaos. His days were spent happily, and he was in a good mood. The only thing that annoyed him was the bad news that spread out from various parts of the country. Even if the Qian and Kinzo sect Song Shengdao worked together, they couldn't cover everything and totally suppress 2 cloud continents and 1 cloud island. Officials all died, commoners were attacked, and memorials were spread into Gantian Mountain like pieces of paper. Such a situation happened a few years ago. At that time, he was furious and charged into the central continent alone. He broke 37 Taoist sects and killed 300,000 Taoist disciples to vent the hatred in his heart. In the end, he forced Dowling vast habitat to lower their heads. He was also forced to leave the cloud world. However, at this moment, when he looked at those numbers, he felt numb. Zhong Shouxin mocked himself and felt a stabbing pain in his heart. So I, Zhong Shou, have reached the level where I view people as ants? As expected, I am not a wise ruler material. If he was a wise ruler, he would be furious and unable to calm down. Like what the Blood Saint Demon Lord said, he wouldn't be able to eat and sleep well. How could he be like him, sitting calmly and leisurely? Zhong Weiran had totally tossed aside the Deqian matter. Dan was still a kid and his intelligence wasn't complete. There were problems in his bloodline, much less taking over the throne. No one could pass the position of ruler to him. He could only give it to someone with more ability. To manage these hundreds of millions of people so that he could completely extricate himself from government affairs. He was already numb to the life and death of the people under his rule and didn't care at all. How could such a person be the ruler of a country? How could he rule? Although that was the case, Zhong Shou still felt rage attacking his heart. Playing around every day was just on the surface. Demon Path. Every day passed, and he didn't see a single memorial reporting casualties. The killing intent in Zhong Shou's chest became thicker and thicker. His heart also became more and more depressed. However, he knew that at this moment, he could only bear with it until the final battle with the Taishang. Like it sensed Zhong Shou's thoughts, the sword spirit of the god refined sword rang out every day, like it wanted to break free from the sword sheath. Speaking of which, since that battle, it has been a long time since this sword drank human blood. The god-refined sword was the sword of the king and also the sword of the killing path. It needed large amounts of essence, energy, and vital energy to allow it to advance. The stronger the blood, the more people it killed, the more satisfied it would be. It was pretty close to being evil. Although Zhong Shou forcefully suppressed the vengeful energy in his chest, he was often on the verge of losing control. He wanted to immediately pull out his sword and slaughter the demon path. A month and 7 days later, Zhong Shou's sword path had some improvements for some reason. That killing sword intent actually broke through the middle spirit realm and reached the late spirit realm. He was only one step away from the transcendent stage and the divine transformation stage in swordsmanship. Although it was the most average out of all the sword paths that Zhong Shou grasped, it was still a surprise. So that was the case. The cultivation of the killing sword intent doesn't have to be in the midst of killing. Continuously suppressing and bearing with it is also a method. His sword intent broke through when he couldn't bear with it anymore and couldn't suppress it anymore. That day, he really couldn't suppress it and slashed out, killing dozens of demon path cultivators who were hiding near Gantian Mountain. It was also at that time that Zhong Shou noticed that his killing path sword intent had some improvements. After this breakthrough, Zhong Shou suddenly calmed down. He didn't suppress his killing intent anymore. The heavens bear witness that in this life, Zhong Shou swears to wipe out the demon path sects. Who am I, Zhong Shou? I am the South Batian, the overlord of the southeast of the cloud world. He was bearing with it now, so that he could wipe out the demon path sects in the future. A few years ago, the Taoist faction killed 1 million of his people, but they paid the price of 37 sects being wiped out and Palace Head Dowling falling. At this moment, the Qian had more than 1 million deaths. If he didn't sacrifice the entire demon path, how could he settle the vengeful souls of his people? Their monster race and the demon path had a bone-deep hatred between them. 2 days later, the huge fleet led by Shi Rulin finally arrived in the cloud world. Zhong Shou finally laughed out loud, holding his sword as he walked out of Hanyan Palace. He couldn't take it anymore and didn't need to. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.